3 hours after I buried my only son, his high school teacher called me. Her voice was trembling so hard I could barely understand her. "Mr. Thorne," she whispered, "I found something Malik left for you. You need to come to my office right now." Then she paused and added the words that stopped my heart. "Don't tell anyone, especially not your daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." When I got to the school and saw who was waiting behind that door, I froze. Everything I thought I knew about my son's death was a lie. Before I tell you what I found in that classroom, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight for the truth when everyone else believed a lie. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Darius Thorne. I am 66 years old. For 40 years I worked as a senior auditor for the state. My life has been defined by numbers, by hard facts, by looking at a spreadsheet and seeing the discrepancies that others miss. I know when things do not add up. And as I stood in the freezing wind of the cemetery watching them lower my son Malik into the ground, nothing added up. Malik was 32, an architect, a man who built skyscrapers and dreams. The police report said he died of a heroin overdose in his studio apartment. They found a needle in his arm. My son who fainted when he got his flu shot at age 12. My son who ran 5 miles with me every single morning for the last 10 years until he got married. They wanted me to believe he died like a junkie in a dark room. I looked across the open grave at Brittany, his wife, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing a black designer dress that hugged her frame a little too perfectly for a funeral. Her blonde hair was styled in loose, beachy waves that caught the dull light of the afternoon. She was sobbing her shoulders, shaking her face buried in a lace handkerchief. To the 50 people standing around us, she was the picture of the devastated young widow, but I was watching her hands. Every time she lowered her head to weep, her left hand would slide up her sleeve. She wasn't wiping tears. She was checking her watch. A platinum Cartier tank watch that cost more than my first car. I counted. She checked the time 4 times in 10 minutes. She wasn't grieving. She was waiting. Standing next to her was her mother, a woman whose face was so tight from surgeries she looked permanently surprised. She placed a hand on Brittany's shoulder, not to comfort her, but to steady her. I stepped closer, my boots sinking into the soft, wet mud. I needed to hear them. The wind shifted, carrying their voices toward me. "It is almost over," Brittany whispered, her voice sharp and clear without a trace of the congestion that comes from real crying. Finally, her mother hissed back, "Let's get this over with. My feet are killing me." I felt a cold rage spread through my chest, colder than the winter air. They were treating my son's burial like an inconvenient dental appointment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stop the service and demand they show some respect, but I stayed silent. I am a black man in America. I know that if I raise my voice at a funeral, especially at a crying white woman, I am not a grieving father. I am a threat. So I swallowed my rage. I let it burn a hole in my stomach. The pastor finished his prayer. People started to disperse, walking past me, patting my shoulder, murmuring condolences that meant nothing. I stood like a statue, my eyes fixed on the headstone. Brittany waited until the last guest had walked away before she approached me. She walked over with a tissue dabbed at her dry eyes. Up close, her makeup was flawless, not a streak of mascara running. "Darius," she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical, raspy whisper. "I know this is not the time, but we need to talk about logistics." "Logistics? My son is not even covered by dirt yet, and she wants to talk logistics." I looked at her. "What is it, Brittany?" She took a deep breath like she was preparing to deliver a rehearsed speech. "The police just released the seal on Malik's studio. The creditors have been calling me non-stop since yesterday morning. It is worse than we thought, Darius. Malik was in deep with what I asked, keeping my voice level. With dealers," she said, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe it herself. "He owed tens of thousands of dollars. He was using the mortgage money to buy drugs. I have no choice. I have to sell the main house. The realtor is coming tomorrow morning to list it. I need you to sign the waiver on the deed right now." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. I stared at the paper. Then I looked at her. "Sell the house. Tomorrow." "Malik did not use drugs, Brittany," I said, my voice deep and rumbling. "He ran 5 miles a day. He drank green smoothies. He was terrified of needles." She sighed a long, condescending sound. "You didn't know him like I did Darius. He hid it well. He was a high-functioning addict. But the money is gone. If we don't sell the house immediately, the bank will take everything. I am trying to save his reputation here." Save his reputation, I repeated. By selling his home 24 hours after his death, No one is selling anything. Not until I see the full autopsy report. Not until I see these supposed debts with my own eyes. Brittany's face changed. The mask of the grieving widow slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing something hard and ugly underneath. Her blue eyes narrowed. She stepped closer to me, raising her voice just enough so that the few stragglers by the parking lot could hear. "Why are you being so difficult?" she cried out, her voice pitching up into hysteria. "He was a junkie, Darius. Your son was a heroin addict. Accept it. You are in denial, and you are hurting me." Heads turned. I saw the looks, the pity shifting to judgment. There was the poor, beautiful widow trying to pick up the pieces, and there was the stubborn, angry father refusing to face reality. She was weaponizing their sympathy against me. She knew exactly what she was doing. "I am not signing anything," I said, lowering my voice to a growl. "And if you try to sell that house before the probate court clears it, I will sue you for everything you are worth." Brittany stared at me. Then she let out a short, cold laugh. "You really don't get it, do you? You are just an old man with a pension. I am his wife. I am the heir. I don't need your permission. I was just trying to be nice." She turned on her heel and walked away. Her heels clicked on the pavement, a sharp, rhythmic sound of victory. She climbed into the brand-new black Mercedes SUV that Malik had bought her just last month, a car he bought for her while she claimed he was drowning in debt. I stood there alone in the graveyard. The wind whipped around my coat, biting through the fabric. I felt small. I felt old. For the first time in my life, the numbers didn't make sense. Malik was meticulous. He was careful with money. He learned that from me. We didn't come from generational wealth. We built what we had brick by brick. The idea that he would throw it all away on heroin was impossible. But I had no proof. Just the gut feeling of a father who knows his child. I drove my rusted pickup truck back to my house. It was a quiet drive. When I unlocked my front door, the silence of the house hit me like a physical blow. Beatrice, my wife, passed away 5 years ago. Since then, it was just me and the silence. But today, the silence felt heavy. It felt like a tomb. I walked into the living room and sat down in my old leather armchair. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the growing dark, staring at a photo of Malik on the mantel. He was smiling, holding his architectural degree, his arm around my shoulder. He looked so strong, so full of life. I reached for the bottle of bourbon on the side table and poured a glass. My hand was shaking. I am not a drinker. Maybe a glass at Christmas. But tonight I needed to burn away the image of Brittany checking her watch over my son's grave. I took a sip. The liquid burned, but it didn't help. The grief was too big. It was a physical weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I had failed him. I had let that woman into our lives. I had seen the red flags years ago, her expensive tastes, her lack of a job, the way she isolated him. But I stayed quiet because I wanted him to be happy. And now, he was dead. Suddenly the phone rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet house. It was the landline. Nobody calls the landline anymore except telemarketers. I let it ring. 3 times. 4 times. It stopped. Then it started again immediately. I frowned. I put the glass down and walked over to the kitchen wall phone. I lifted the receiver. "Hello, Mr. Thorne, is that you?" The voice on the other end was a woman. She sounded elderly, breathless, like she had been running. "Yes, this is Darius Thorne." "Oh, thank God." "Mr. Thorne, this is Etta Johnson. I was Malik's homeroom teacher at Lincoln High School. Do you remember me, Mrs. Johnson?" Of course I remembered her. She was a legend in our neighborhood. She had taught 3 generations of kids. She was tough as nails but loved her students fiercely. Malik had adored her. "I remember you, Mrs. Johnson," I said, rubbing my tired eyes. "Thank you for the flowers you sent to the funeral home. It was very kind." No, listen to me," she interrupted, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "I didn't call to offer condolences. I called because Malik came to see me." I froze. "He came to see you when 3 days ago," she said. "The day before he died." My grip tightened on the phone receiver. The plastic creaked. Why would Malik go to his high school teacher the day before he died? "He was scared, Darius," Mrs. Johnson said. "I have never seen him like that. He was looking over his shoulder. He was sweating. He gave me a package. He told me, Mrs. Johnson, if anything happens to me, if I have an accident, or if I just don't come back, you call my father. You give this only to him. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A package. What kind of package? He said he couldn't keep it at his house. She continued, rushing her words. He said she would find it. He said you were the only one who would understand the numbers, the code word between me and my son. He knew I would look at the data. He knew I would audit the truth. Mrs. Johnson, I said, my voice steady, now cold and sharp. What is in the package? I don't know, she said. It is sealed. But Mr. Thorne, you need to come to the school right now. I am in my office behind the library. The night janitor let me in. But you have to hurry. I am coming, I said. I grabbed my keys. And Darius, she added, and I could hear the fear in her voice. Do not tell anyone you are coming here, especially not his wife. Malik said. He said if she finds out about this, we are all in danger. She hung up. I stood there in the dark kitchen for a second, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. Danger. My son knew he was in danger. He didn't overdose, he was scared. I didn't bother changing out of my funeral suit. I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and my old tire iron from the closet. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew one thing. Brittany was lying about everything. I got into my truck and drove. The streets were empty. It was almost 9 at night. The city lights blurred past me. I wasn't crying anymore. The grief had been replaced by something else. Adrenaline. Focus. I pulled into the parking lot of Lincoln High School. It was dark, the building looming like a shadow against the night sky. I saw a single light on in the back near the library wing, Mrs. Johnson's office. I parked the truck in the shadows away from the streetlights. I gripped the tire iron and walked toward the side entrance. The door was propped open with a book just a crack. I slipped inside. The hallway smelled of floor wax and old paper, the smell of my son's childhood. My footsteps echoed on the linoleum. I reached the office door. It was closed. I saw a shadow move under the frosted glass. I knocked. 3 sharp raps. The door opened instantly. Mrs. Johnson stood there. She looked smaller than I remembered, her gray hair pulled back in a bun, her hands trembling. Come in quickly, she whispered, pulling me inside and locking the door behind me. Where is it? I asked. Where is the package? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped aside. There was someone else in the room. Sitting in the corner in the shadows was a young black woman. She couldn't have been more than 25. She was terrified, clutching an oversized purse to her chest, and peeking out from behind her legs was a small boy. I looked at the boy, and the floor dropped out from under me. He had Malik's eyes. He had the same exact shape of his nose. He had the same cowlick in his hair that I used to brush down every morning before school. It was like looking at a ghost of my son from 25 years ago. Who are you? I breathed, dropping the tire iron. The young woman stood up. Her eyes were wet. I am Keisha, she said softly. And this is Leo, Malik's son. I looked from the boy to Mrs. Johnson, then back to the woman. Malik had a son he never told me about. Mrs. Johnson handed me a thick manila envelope. It is all in here, Mr. Thorne, she said. Malik wasn't an addict. He was planning to leave Brittany. He found out she was having an affair. He found out she was draining his accounts. He was going to file for divorce this week. I opened the envelope. Inside was a leather-bound journal, Malik's handwriting, and on top of it a note. Dad, if you are reading this, I am already gone. Don't believe the accident. Brittany threatened to hurt Leo if I left her. She said she would make sure I never saw him again. I had to protect them. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the journal. My son had a secret family. He had a child, and he had been living in terror. He brought us here 3 nights ago, Keisha said, her voice trembling. He said Brittany found out about Leo. He said she was asking dangerous people, how to make problems disappear. He told us to hide with Mrs. Johnson until he could get the legal papers signed. He was supposed to come back for us yesterday morning. She started to cry. But he never came. I looked at the little boy Leo. He was staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. My grandson, my blood, the only piece of Malik I had left. And Brittany knew. She knew about him. And that meant this child was a threat to her inheritance. If Malik had a son, Brittany wouldn't get the house. She wouldn't get the insurance. She would get nothing. Realization hit me like a physical punch. Malik didn't just die. He was removed. And if Brittany knew where this boy was, she wouldn't stop until he was removed too. We have to go, I said, my voice hard. We cannot stay here. Suddenly, the headlights of a car swept across the office window. We all froze. Mrs. Johnson peeked through the blinds. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. "There is a black SUV pulling up to the back gate. 2 men are getting out." I moved to the window. It was the Mercedes. Brittany's car. She found us. I turned to Keisha and Mrs. Johnson. "Grab the boy. We are leaving out the fire exit." Now, this wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a war. And I was going to burn Brittany's world to the ground. I gripped the steering wheel of my rusted Ford F-150 until my knuckles turned the color of ash. The drive to Lincoln High School usually took 20 minutes, but tonight it felt like driving through a dark tunnel that never ended. Every pair of headlights that appeared in my rearview mirror made my heart hammer against my ribs. I was a 66-year-old man who had spent his life auditing spreadsheets and fighting with the IRS, but tonight I felt like a fugitive. I checked the mirror again. A black sedan had been 2 cars behind me for the last 4 blocks. I took a sharp right turn onto Elm Street without signaling. The sedan kept going straight. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding, but the tension in my shoulders did not loosen. Mrs. Johnson's warning was ringing in my ears like a fire alarm. You could be in danger. I pulled into the back lot of the high school. The building was a massive brick structure that looked more like a fortress in the dark. It was silent. The playground where Malik used to scrape his knees was empty and swallowed by shadows. The only sign of life was a single, faint yellow light glowing from a window on the ground floor behind the library wing. That was Etta Johnson's office. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment in the dark. I reached under the passenger seat and wrapped my hand around the cold steel of my tire iron. I did not want to use it, but I was done being the passive, grieving father. I stepped out of the truck. The wind bit through my funeral suit. I walked quickly, staying close to the brick wall to avoid the streetlights. I reached the heavy metal side door. It was propped open just a fraction with a thick textbooks. I slipped inside. The hallway smelled of floor wax and old paper, the smell of my son's childhood. My footsteps echoed too loudly on the linoleum, so I walked on the balls of my feet. I reached the frosted glass door of the office. I raised my hand and knocked 3 times. The door flew open instantly. Mrs. Johnson stood there looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. Her gray hair was pulling loose from her bun and her eyes were wide with terror. She grabbed my sleeve and pulled me inside, locking the door behind me with a decisive click. "You made it," she whispered. "Did anyone follow you?" "I do not think so," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Etta, what is going on? Why did Malik come here?" She did not answer. Instead, she stepped aside, revealing the corner of the small office. There was an old leather armchair pushed against the filing cabinets. Sitting in it was a young black woman I had never seen before. She could not have been more than 25. She was clutching a large purse to her chest like a shield, but it was not the woman who made the air leave my lungs. It was the boy standing next to her. He was about 5 years old, wearing a small blue coat and clutching a toy truck. He looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. I dropped the tire iron. It hit the floor with a heavy clang, but I did not hear it. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. The boy had Malik's nose. He had the exact same curve of the eyebrows. He had the same stubborn set of the jaw that I saw in the mirror every morning and that I had seen in my son for 32 years. It was like looking at a ghost. "Who are you?" I breathed. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. The young woman stood up. She was trembling. "I am Keisha," she said softly. Her voice was melodic but laced with a deep sadness. "And this is Leo." She put a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "He is Malik's son," she said. "He is your grandson, Mr. Thorne." I fell back against the door. A grandson. I had a grandson. Malik had never said a word, not a whisper. Why? Why would he hide this from me? I looked at the boy again. Leo. He stared back at me with a curiosity that cut through his fear. I wanted to rush forward and hug him, but I was frozen. Why, I asked. My voice cracked. Why did I not know? Because of her, Keisha said. A flash of anger crossed her face, hardening her features. Because of Brittany. Mrs. Johnson moved to her desk and picked up a thick manila envelope. She handed it to me. Her hands were shaking. Malik brought this to me 3 days ago, she said. He was terrified, Darius. I have never seen a man so scared. He said he could not keep it at his house. He said Brittany has eyes everywhere. He said she has cameras in the living room and trackers on his car. He said she threatened to kill him if he ever tried to leave. I took the envelope. It felt heavy. I opened the clasp and dumped the contents onto Mrs. Johnson's desk. There was a black leather-bound journal and a cheap burner phone. Keisha stepped forward. Malik and I met 6 years ago, she said. Before he married Brittany, we were in love. But he was already engaged. His family pressured him. Brittany's family pressured him. He made a mistake. He married her. But we never stopped loving each other. When Leo was born, Malik wanted to tell you. He wanted to leave her. She paused, wiping a tear from her cheek. But Brittany found out, she continued. She told him that if he ever tried to divorce her, she would destroy him. She said she would accuse him of abuse. She said she would make sure he never saw Leo. She said she had connections that could make people disappear. Malik was trying to protect us. He stayed with her to keep us safe. I picked up the journal. It was Malik's handwriting, the neat, precise script of an architect. I opened it to a random page from 6 months ago. October 14th. Brittany came home drunk again. She smelled like expensive cologne, not mine. She laughed when I asked her about the withdrawal from the joint account. She said I should be grateful she lets me live in this house. She transferred $8,000 to her mother today. She labeled it Interior Design Consulting. We haven't bought furniture in 2 years. I tracked the IP address. The transfer was made from her lover's apartment downtown. I flipped the page. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read. November 2nd. She knows about Keisha. I don't know how, but she knows. She smiled at me over breakfast and said it would be a shame if something happened to that little boy across town. I have to get them out. I have to get the evidence. I'm going to the lawyer next week. I can't live like this. It is hell. I looked up at Keisha. The horror was rising in my throat like bile. My son had been living in a prison. He gave me the phone, Keisha said, pointing to the burner phone on the desk. He said he recorded her. He recorded her threatening him. He recorded her talking to her lover about the money she was stealing from his accounts. He was going to take all of this to a divorce attorney. I picked up the phone. It was dead. The charger is in the bag, Mrs. Johnson said. I looked at the last entry in the journal. It was dated 3 days ago, the day before he died. I have everything I need. The bank statements, the recordings, the photos of her with Sterling. I am meeting with Javier Rodriguez tomorrow morning. I am changing the will tonight. I am going to be free. I am going to bring Leo home to meet Dad. I closed the book. The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating. He died the night he wrote this, I whispered. He did not overdose, Keisha said fiercely. Malik hated drugs. He wouldn't even take aspirin for a headache. He was poisoned. She did it. She knew he was leaving. She knew he was going to cut her off and expose her. So she killed him. I looked at the date again. He was going to meet with Javier Rodriguez. I knew that name. Javier Rodriguez was the toughest shark in the city, a lawyer who destroyed people for a living. If Malik had gone to him, Brittany would have been left with nothing. She stopped him, I said. The realization was cold and hard like a stone in my gut. She didn't just kill him, she executed him to protect her lifestyle. And now she is coming for us, Keisha said. Her voice rose in panic. Malik told me that if anything happened to him, I had to run. He said Brittany would not leave any loose ends. Leo is the heir, Darius. If Malik is gone, everything goes to Brittany, unless he has a child. Leo is the only thing standing between her and millions of dollars. I looked at my grandson. He was playing with the toy truck, running it along the edge of the desk, completely unaware that his existence was a death sentence. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my mind. The rush to sell the house, the closed casket funeral she tried to push for, the fake tears. It was all a cover-up. She needed the money, and she needed it fast before anyone found out about Leo. I put the journal and the phone back into the envelope. I tucked it inside my jacket. It felt like I was carrying a bomb. We cannot stay here, I said. My voice was the voice of the auditor now. Cold, calculating, assessing the risk. You are right. She will come for the boy. Does she know where you live? She knows everything, Keisha said. Mrs. Johnson stepped forward. You can't go back to your house, Mr. Thorne. If she killed Malik, she won't hesitate to hurt you. I looked at Etta. I looked at Keisha and little Leo. I was 66 years old. I had a bad back and a retirement account. I was not an action hero, but I was a father. And I was a grandfather. And the people who killed my son were celebrating his death right now thinking they had won. They made a mistake, I said. They left me alive. I turned to the door. We are leaving. My truck is out back. I know a place. A place where they won't look. Where, Keisha asked. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and ushered them into the hallway. We moved quickly through the dark school. I carried Leo in one arm and the tire iron in the other. He felt solid and warm against my chest. A living, breathing piece of Malik. I swore to myself in that dark hallway that I would die before I let that woman touch a hair on his head. We reached the exit. I pushed the bar and the cold night air hit us. I scanned the parking lot. It was empty. My truck was waiting in the shadows. Get in, I said. Get on the floor in the back. Do not sit up until I say so. Keisha climbed in, pulling Leo down with her. Mrs. Johnson stood by the door, shivering. Go home, Etta, I said. Lock your doors. If anyone asks, you haven't seen me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Save that boy, Darius. Make them pay. I climbed into the driver's seat. I started the engine. As I pulled out of the school lot, I checked my rearview mirror. A pair of headlights turned the corner 2 blocks away. They were moving fast, too fast. I slammed on the gas. The chase was on, but now I knew what I was fighting for. I wasn't just fighting for the truth. I was fighting for the future. And Brittany Miller had no idea what kind of war she had just started. I dropped Keisha and little Leo at a Motel 6 on the outskirts of town and paid for 3 nights in cash. I told them not to open the door for anyone but me. Then I drove like a man possessed to the colonial house on Wisteria Lane where my son had lived for the past 3 years. It was a wealthy neighborhood, the kind where the lawns are manicured with nail scissors and the neighbors call the police if they see a car they do not recognize. I parked my rusted truck 2 houses down. I did not want to alert her. I needed to get inside. I needed Malik's laptop. According to the journal I had just read, Malik kept a digital backup of every transaction Brittany had made. He had folders of evidence hidden on a local drive that did not sync to the cloud. If I could get that laptop, I would have the proof I needed to send her to prison for fraud before I even proved the murder. I walked up the driveway, staying in the shadows of the large oak trees. The house was dark except for a light in the foyer. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver key Malik had given me the day he bought the place. Dad, this is your home too, he had said. You never have to knock. I felt a lump in my throat, but I swallowed it down. This was a mission. I stepped onto the porch and slid the key into the lock. It went in an inch and then stopped. I frowned. I pulled it out and tried again, wiggling it. It hit a wall of metal. I pulled my phone out and shined the flashlight on the doorknob. My stomach dropped. The brass was shiny and unscratched. It was brand new. A smart lock with a keypad and a biometric scanner. She had changed the locks. Malik had been in this ground for less than 5 hours, and she had already called a locksmith. She knew I had a key. She knew I would come. I stepped back and looked at the windows. Maybe I could break a pane in the back. I was considering the risk when the porch light suddenly blazed on, blinding me. I threw my arm up to shield my eyes. The front door swung open. Brittany stood there. She was still wearing the black dress from the funeral, but she had kicked off her heels. She held a glass of red wine in one hand. But it was not Brittany that made me freeze. It was the 2 men standing behind her. They were huge, dressed in tactical black uniforms with private security logos on their chests. They had hands resting on their utility belts near tasers and batons. Well, well, she said, her voice slurring slightly. If it isn't my grieving father-in-law, I was wondering when you would show up. Brittany let me in, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I need to get Malik's personal effects. I have a right. You have no rights, she spat back, stepping onto the porch. The wine sloshed in her glass. You are trespassing, Darius. This is my house. My husband is dead. Everything in there belongs to me. She turned to the security guards. This is the man I told you about. He is aggressive. He has a history of violence. I am terrified for my safety. The larger guard stepped forward. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. Sir, you need to vacate the premises immediately. I stood my ground. My son's laptop is in that study, I said, pointing a shaking finger at the house. It contains evidence of financial crimes. If you destroy it, you are committing a felony. Brittany laughed. It was a high, shrill sound that cut through the night air. Evidence, she mocked. You are delusional, Darius, just like your son was, always paranoid, always thinking someone was out to get him. Maybe that is why he stuck a needle in his arm. Do not talk about him, I roared, stepping forward. The guard moved faster than I expected. He shoved me hard in the chest. I stumbled back off the porch and nearly fell onto the walkway. Back away, sir, the guard barked, his hand moving to his baton. Suddenly, floodlights from the neighboring houses flicked on. I saw curtains twitching. I saw faces pressing against the glass. This was a neighborhood where people watched. And what did they see? They saw an angry black man shouting at a grieving white widow on her front porch late at night. They saw a threat. Brittany saw the neighbors watching too. Her demeanor changed instantly. She dropped the wine glass. It shattered on the porch bricks, sending red liquid splashing like blood across the white wood. She brought her hands to her face and let out a scream that sounded like pure terror. "Please stop," she shrieked for the benefit of the audience. "Please do not hurt me, Darius, just leave me alone." She was performing. It was the same act from the cemetery, but now she had a stage. I stood there breathing hard, my hands clenched into fists. I wanted to storm past those guards. I wanted to tear that house apart until I found the truth. But I knew exactly what was happening. She was baiting me. She wanted me to attack. She wanted me to give them a reason to hurt me or worse. Sirens wailed in the distance. They were getting closer fast. She called them, I realized. She called them before I even walked up the driveway. She knew I was coming. The blue and red lights swept across the lawn, casting long dancing shadows. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt at the curb. 4 officers jumped out, hands on their holsters. "Step away from the house," one of them yelled. "Hands where I can see them." I raised my hands slowly. "I am his father," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and authoritative, the voice I used in audit hearings. "My son died yesterday. I am just trying to collect his things." The officers did not lower their stance. They walked up the driveway encircling me. One of them moved past me to the porch, where Brittany was now sobbing into the chest of the security guard. "Officer." "Thank God," she cried, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He came here screaming. He tried to break down the door. He said he was going to burn the house down because I wouldn't give him money. It was a lie. A bold, horrific lie." But the officer looked at the broken glass on the porch. He looked at the weeping blonde woman, and then he looked at me. "Turn around, sir," the officer said. "Hands behind your back. I am a senior auditor for the state of Virginia," I said, my voice tight. "I have no criminal record. This woman is lying. Check the security cameras." "The cameras are down," Brittany sobbed on cue. "He broke them before he came to the door." I stared at her in disbelief. She had thought of everything. The officer grabbed my wrist and spun me around. He slammed me against the hood of the patrol car. I felt the cold metal against my cheek. The humiliation burned hotter than the engine. "You are being detained for trespassing and harassment," the officer said as he clicked the cuffs onto my wrists. I watched Brittany over the roof of the car. She had stopped crying. She was looking right at me. A small, cold smile played on her lips. She mouthed 2 words: "Game over." They put me in the back of the cruiser. I sat there for 20 minutes while they took her statement. I watched as she signed papers, wiping her eyes periodically. I watched as the neighbors came out in their bathrobes to comfort her. They glared at the patrol car, shaking their heads at the monster who would terrorize a widow. Finally, the officer opened the door. He leaned in. "Mrs. Thorne has decided not to press charges tonight," he said. "She says she doesn't want to ruin her husband's funeral week." "You are lucky, pal." He uncuffed me. "But listen to me." He continued, his face inches from mine. "If you come back to this street, if you text her, if you call her, we will arrest you for stalking and we will not be nice about it. Do you understand?" I rubbed my wrists. I understood perfectly. The law was a weapon and she was holding the trigger. "I understand," I said. "Get in your truck and go," the officer said. I walked to my truck. My legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead. I climbed in and started the engine. As I pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. Brittany was standing in the doorway, framed by the light. She raised her glass of wine, which one of the guards had apparently refilled, and toasted me. I drove away defeated. I had no laptop. I had no evidence. And now I had a police record starting to form. She had won this round. She had the house, she had the sympathy, and she had the law on her side. But as I drove through the dark streets, my mind began to clear. The anger that had clouded my judgment was settling into a cold, hard resolve. She thought she had won because she stopped me from getting into the house. She thought the laptop was the only thing I was looking for. She forgot who taught Malik everything he knew. She forgot that when Malik was 12 years old, I taught him that the most important things are never kept in the obvious places. We used to play a game, hide and seek with valuables. I taught him that bedrooms are the first place thieves look. I taught him that offices are the first place the IRS looks. I taught him to bury his treasures where no one looks because it is too dirty. I remembered a conversation we had 6 months ago. Malik had come over to help me fix my garage door. Dad, he had said, wiping grease off his hands. You know that safe box we built under the floorboards in your workshop? The one under the oil stains. I nodded. I built one too, he said, in my garage, just in case. I gripped the steering wheel. Brittany had changed the locks on the house. She had secured the perimeter. She had security guards watching the front door. But she was a princess. She was a woman who hired people to pump her gas. She would never set foot in a dirty, greasy garage filled with tools and oil cans. She probably didn't even know what was in there. I checked the time on the dashboard. It was 3:00 a.m. The police were gone. The neighbors were asleep. I wasn't going home. I was going back. But this time I wasn't going to the front door. I was going to the alleyway behind the property. I turned the truck around. Brittany thought the game was over. But I was just moving my pieces. If Malik had listened to me, if he had built the safe box exactly the way I taught him, then the real evidence wasn't in the laptop in his study. It was under the concrete. And I was going to dig it up with my bare hands if I had to. The night was not over yet. I parked the truck 3 blocks away from the house on a side street that was dark and lined with overgrown hedges. It was 2 in the morning. The neighborhood was silent in the way that only wealthy neighborhoods can be. There were no sirens, no dogs barking, just the low hum of expensive HVAC systems keeping the mansions at a perfect 70 degrees. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment listening to the blood rushing in my ears. I was 66 years old. My knees ached when it rained, and my eyesight was failing in low light. I was not a cat burglar, but tonight I had to be. I grabbed the tire iron and the heavy flashlight from the passenger seat. I stepped out of the truck and closed the door quietly, guiding it shut so it would not latch with a loud bang. I walked toward the alleyway that ran behind the properties on Wisteria Lane. The rich people in this town obsessed over their front lawns. They hired landscaping crews to manicure every blade of grass and installed ring cameras on every front porch. But they ignored the alleys. To them, the alley was just where the trash went. It was invisible. I knew this because I had taught Malik to think like an auditor. Look at the places nobody else looks. Find the gaps in the system. When he bought this house 3 years ago, I walked the perimeter with him. I pointed out the blind spots. We fixed the back fence together. I told him to leave the third panel from the corner loose just in case he ever locked himself out. He had laughed at me then. He called me paranoid. But he did it. He left the bottom bracket unscrewed. I reached the back of his property. The fence was 8 feet tall, made of solid cedar privacy planks. I counted 3 panels from the corner. I crouched down and pushed on the bottom of the wood. It groaned softly, but it swung inward. The gap was narrow, just enough for a man to squeeze through. I pushed my bag through first, then I laid on my stomach and shimmied under the wood. The ground was wet and cold, soaking through my funeral suit. I stood up on the other side. I was in. The backyard was expansive. A shadowland of perfectly trimmed bushes, and a swimming pool that glowed with a faint, eerie blue light. I stayed low, moving quickly toward the detached 3-car garage. The house loomed to my right, dark and silent. I could see the silhouette of the security guard standing on the front porch smoking a cigarette. He was watching the street. He was not watching the back. I reached the side door of the garage. It was locked. I did not panic. I knew my son. He was a creature of habit, and he was my son. We did not trust digital keypads. We trusted physical backups. I reached up above the door frame, feeling along the top ledge. My fingers brushed against dust and cobwebs and then cold metal. The spare key. I grabbed it and slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, silent click. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of motor oil, sawdust, and old leather. It was the smell of my workshop when Malik was a boy. It was the smell of safety. I switched on my flashlight, keeping the beam pointed at the floor to avoid alerting anyone through the windows. The garage was huge. Malik's Porsche was parked on the left side, gleaming in the dark. The other bays were empty. Brittany's Mercedes was parked out front. But I was not interested in the cars. I walked to the back corner where a heavy industrial workbench stood bolted to the wall. It was covered in tools, blueprints, and architectural models. This was Plan B. 6 months ago, Malik told me he was worried about money disappearing from the joint account. I told him to get a safe. He said Brittany knew the combination to the wall safe in the master bedroom. I told him to build one she would never find. We spent a weekend installing it. We cut through the concrete foundation, poured a new false bottom, and covered it with heavy rubber floor mats and the tool chest. It was a hiding spot designed to be invisible. I gripped the handle of the massive red tool chest. It weighed 300 pounds. I braced my feet against the wall and pushed. My back screamed in protest. My muscles burned. I gritted my teeth and shoved harder. The chest scraped across the floor inch by inch. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes. I pushed until there was enough clearance. I fell to my knees, gasping for air. I pulled back the rubber mat. The concrete floor looked seamless, but I knew where to look. I took the flat end of the tire iron and jammed it into a hairline crack near the wall. I levered it up. A square block of concrete lifted, revealing a steel cavity underneath. I shined the light into the hole. My heart stopped. It was empty. The steel box was bare. There were no stacks of cash. There were no gold coins. There was nothing. I sat back on my heels, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. She had found it. Brittany had found the one place that was supposed to be safe. She must have tortured him. She must have forced him to give up the location before she killed him. Or maybe she was just thorough. Maybe she had torn this place apart, looking for every cent he had. I slammed my fist against the concrete floor. I had risked everything to come here, and I was too late. The money was gone. The leverage was gone. I leaned over the hole again, shining the light into the corners, desperate to find something, anything. And then I saw it. It was a single thin sheet of paper pressed flat against the bottom of the metal box. It was white against the gray steel. It was so flat that if you were just grabbing handfuls of cash in a hurry, you would miss it. I reached down. My fingers trembled as I peeled the paper off the cold metal. I brought it up to the light. It was a medical document. The logo at the top said, Quest Diagnostics. I read the text. Patient name, Malik Thorne. Date of collection 3 days ago. Test type comprehensive toxicology screen 10 panel. My eyes scanned down the list of substances. Amphetamines negative, cocaine negative, opiates negative, heroin negative, fentanyl negative. Every single field was marked negative. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He was clean. My son was clean. He knew she was going to accuse him of using drugs. He knew she was setting up a narrative to use in court for the divorce custody battle. He had gone to a lab and gotten tested voluntarily just 72 hours before his death to prove he was sober. This piece of paper was his insurance policy. It was proof that the needle the police found in his arm was a lie. You cannot die of a heroin overdose if your blood is clean 3 days prior and you have no track marks. This paper proved the overdose was staged. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my inside jacket pocket right next to my heart. I had the proof of his innocence. Now I needed the proof of her guilt. I pushed the tool chest back into place. I covered the floor. I wiped my sweat from the bench. I left the garage exactly as I found it. I locked the side door and slipped the key back onto the ledge. I was about to head back to the fence when I stopped. I looked at the large plastic trash bins lined up against the side of the garage. Tomorrow was trash pickup day. The bins were full. An auditor checks everything. An auditor knows that people throw away their secrets because they think once it is in the bin, it disappears. I walked over to the bins. I lifted the lid of the recycling bin first. It was filled with wine bottles. Expensive stuff. Dozens of them. Brittany had been drinking heavily. I closed it. I opened the main trash bin. It smelled of rotting food and expensive perfume. I shined my light inside. It was filled with black garbage bags. I reached in and grabbed the bag on top. It was light. I untied the knot. Inside were tissues stained with lipstick, makeup wipes, and empty boxes of luxury face cream. Brittany's bathroom trash. I dug deeper. I moved aside a bag that felt like it was full of kitchen scraps. Near the bottom, I found a small white grocery bag tied tightly in a double knot. I pulled it out. I tore the plastic open. Inside were coffee grounds, eggshells, and a small orange plastic cylinder. I picked up the cylinder. It was a prescription pill bottle. I wiped the coffee grounds off the label so I could read it. Patient name, Malik Thorne. Prescribing physician, Dr. Isaac Sterling. Medication, succinylcholine. I froze. I knew what that was. I had audited a hospital once. Succinylcholine is a paralytic. It is used for intubation during surgery. It relaxes the muscles so completely that you stop breathing. It is not something you prescribe to an architect for back pain. It is not something you take home in a pill bottle. I looked closer at the label. It wasn't pills. It was a liquid solution. The date on the bottle was yesterday, the day he died. I shined the light inside the bottle. It was empty. There was just a small amount of residue at the bottom. I looked at the doctor's name again. Dr. Isaac Sterling. I knew that name. He was a concierge doctor for the wealthy in this town. He was the kind of doctor who wrote scripts for whatever his rich clients wanted, no questions asked. Why would Malik have a surgical paralytic prescribed to him the day he died? He wouldn't. She drugged him. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She didn't just stick a needle in him. She paralyzed him first. She put this in his coffee or his food. He would have been awake, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to breathe while she staged the scene, while she put the needle in his arm, while she watched him die. I felt a wave of rage so hot it blurred my vision. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick down the door of that house and drag her out into the street, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had the evidence. I had the toxicology report that proved he was clean. I had the bottle that proved he was poisoned. And I had the name of the doctor who helped her do it. I took a picture of the bottle with my phone just in case. Then I wrapped the bottle in my handkerchief and put it in my pocket. I retied the trash bags and placed them back exactly how I found them. I slipped back through the loose fence panel and crawled into the alley. I walked back to my truck, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what I was carrying. I had the smoking gun. I started the truck and drove away without turning on my headlights until I was 2 blocks away. I wasn't going home. I couldn't go home. They would be looking for me there. I had to go to the only place left where I could keep my grandson safe. I drove to the bank. It was 3:00 a.m., but the night deposit box was not what I needed. I needed my safety deposit box, and the bank didn't open for 6 hours. But I had my own personal vault. I drove to the storage unit I had rented 10 years ago after Beatrice died. It was a climate-controlled unit on the south side of town where I kept my files, my old tax returns, and the emergency fund I had been building since 1985. I pulled up to the gate, punched in my code, and drove to Unit 404. I rolled up the metal door. Inside it was dusty and quiet. I moved a stack of boxes labeled 1999 tax returns. Behind them was a floor safe. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. The heavy door clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash. $250,000. Money I had saved from consulting jobs over 40 years. Money the IRS knew about, but Brittany didn't. Next to the cash were 4 gold bars, and a small black book containing the contact information for the best criminal defense attorney in the state, Javier Rodriguez. I loaded the cash and the gold into a duffel bag. I took the black book. Brittany thought she had taken everything. She thought she had stripped Malik clean. She thought I was just a broke old man with a pension. She was about to find out that Darius Thorne was the most dangerous kind of enemy, an enemy with nothing to lose and a war chest full of cash. I zipped up the bag. I had the money. I had the evidence. Now I needed to get the lawyer. And then I was going to bring the whole corrupt house of cards crashing down on her head. I sat at the small wobbly desk in the Motel 6 room. Keisha and Leo were asleep on the bed behind me. The boy was curled up in a ball, clutching his toy truck even in his sleep. I watched the rise and fall of his small chest for a moment before turning back to my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room, illuminating the bags under my eyes. I had not slept in 24 hours, but my mind was razor sharp. I had spent 40 years hunting down embezzlement and fraud for the state government. People think numbers are boring, but I know the truth. Numbers have a voice. They scream when something is wrong. And right now I was about to make my son's financial records sing. I opened the web browser and navigated to the iCloud login page. Malik was a brilliant architect, but he was also sentimental. He had told me once years ago, "Dad, if you ever need to get into my files, just remember Mom." I typed in his username. Then I stared at the password field. My fingers hovered over the keys. I typed 09121958. September 12, 1958. Beatrice's birthday. My late wife. The screen buffered for a second that felt like a lifetime. Then the lock icon clicked open. Access granted. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Even in his sophisticated digital life, Malik had kept his mother as the key to his privacy. It broke my heart all over again. I navigated straight to the Files app. I ignored the Photos folder. I knew seeing pictures of him happy before Brittany would destroy me right now. I went to the folder labeled Financials. Inside were subfolders for every year. I clicked on the current year. There were PDFs of bank statements, tax returns, and investment portfolios. I started with the joint checking account. I downloaded the last 12 months of statements and opened them side by side. I put on my reading glasses and I became the auditor. The grief receded. The cold logic took over. I scanned the columns of debits and credits. At first glance it looked normal. Mortgage payments, utilities, grocery bills. But an auditor does not look at the first glance. An auditor looks for the rhythm. And the rhythm here was off. There was a recurring outgoing transfer on the 15th of every month. It started 2 years ago. The amount was always the same, $8,500. The recipient was listed simply as BMD LLC. I opened a new tab and searched the corporate registry database. I typed in BMD LLC. The results popped up instantly. Brittany Miller Designs. Miller was Brittany's maiden name. The registered agent was her mother. I sat back in the creaky chair. $8,500 a month. That was over $100,000 a year. She was siphoning money directly from their joint account into a shell company owned by her mother. She labeled it Interior Design Consulting, but I had been to their house. The furniture had not changed in 3 years. There was no design happening. This was theft, plain and simple. She was bleeding him dry slowly, consistently like a parasite, and Malik must have noticed. That was why he started investigating. That was why he started the journal. He saw the leak in the ship, and when he tried to plug it, she decided to throw him overboard. I went back to the statements. I looked closer. There were other irregularities. Cash withdrawals at ATMs near casinos. 500 here, 1,000 there. Malik did not gamble. He hated casinos. He said they were taxes on people who couldn't do math. But Brittany loved the thrill. I traced the dates. The withdrawals coincided with weekends when Malik was away on business trips. She was playing with his money while he was working to earn it. Then I switched to the credit card statements. This was where the greed became reckless. The statements for the joint American Express Black Card were pages long. I scanned the merchant names. Tiffany and Company, Cartier, Van Cleef and Arpels. In the last 3 months alone, there were charges totaling $45,000 at high-end jewelry stores. I felt a surge of confusion. Malik did not wear jewelry. He wore a simple wedding band and a watch I gave him for graduation. He never bought expensive gifts for Brittany, not like this. He preferred experiences, travel, dinners. I looked at the dates of the purchases, November 14th, December 2nd, December 20th. I logged into the credit card portal to see the itemized receipts. November 14th, a diamond tennis bracelet, $12,000. December 2nd, platinum earrings, $8,000. December 20th, a vintage Rolex, $25,000. I zoomed in on the receipt for the Rolex. It was a men's watch. But Malik already had a watch, and he hadn't been wearing a Rolex when he died. He was wearing my gift. So who was the Rolex for? I remembered the journal entry Keisha had shown me. Brittany had a lover. She was buying gifts for another man with my son's money. She was dressing her boyfriend in platinum and diamonds while plotting to murder the man who paid the bill. The audacity was breathtaking. It was not just greed. It was contempt. She hated Malik. She hated him for working hard. She hated him for being decent. She treated him like a wallet that she could empty and then discard. I printed the statements to a PDF file on my secure drive. I had the motive for theft. I had the proof of embezzlement. But I needed the motive for murder. Theft alone usually ends in divorce, not a funeral. Why kill him now? Why was the timing so urgent? I went back to the main folder. I searched for the word insurance. Nothing came up in the main drive. I checked the trash folder. Nothing. I sat and thought. Malik was organized. If he had a policy, he would keep it safe. I checked his email archives. I searched for terms like policy beneficiary coverage. And then I found it. It was an email from a broker named Specialized Life Insurance Group. The subject line was Policy Approval 994022. The date was 2 years ago. I opened the email. Attached was a PDF of a term life insurance policy. I opened it. The coverage amount made my eyes widen. $3 million. It was a massive policy. But for a high-earning architect in his 30s, it was not unheard of. I scrolled down to the fine print. I was looking for one specific clause. Every life insurance policy has it. The contestability period. It is usually 2 years. During those 2 years, if the insured person dies, the insurance company can investigate everything. They can deny the claim for suicide, for undisclosed medical conditions, for almost anything. But after the 2-year mark, the policy becomes incontestable. Unless they can prove fraud, the company has to pay out no matter how the person died. Even if it looks like a drug overdose. Even if it looks like suicide. I looked at the effective date of the policy, January 15th, 2 years ago. I looked at the date of Malik's death, January 17th of this year. The room seemed to spin. The air got thin. I did the math in my head even though I did not need to. The contestability period had ended exactly 48 hours before my son died. She waited. She knew about the clause. She probably picked the policy herself. She waited 2 full years. She endured 2 years of marriage. She hated 2 years of siphoning money slowly, 2 years of hiding her affair. She watched the calendar like a hawk. January 15th passed. The policy matured. It became ironclad. And 2 days later, Malik was dead. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a desperate act of a woman about to be divorced. This was a long-term investment strategy. She had treated my son's life like a bond that had to reach maturity before she could cash it out. I looked at the beneficiary line just to be sure. Primary beneficiary Brittany Thorne, 100%. There were no contingent beneficiaries. If Malik died, she got everything. $3 million tax-free dollars plus the house, plus the savings, plus the pension. She would be set for life. She and her lover and her mother could live like royalty on the blood of my son. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Keisha stirred on the bed but did not wake up. I stood up and paced the small room. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from a rage so pure and hot it felt like it could melt steel. I had spent my life believing in the system, in rules, in audits and paper trails. I believed that if you followed the rules, you were safe. Malik followed the rules. He worked hard. He saved. He insured his life to protect his family. And his wife used those rules to execute him. I grabbed the bottle of succinylcholine from my jacket pocket. I set it on the desk next to the laptop. I had the weapon. I had the financial motive. I had the timeline. But I needed to confront the man who made it possible. Dr. Isaac Sterling. The prescription bottle had his name on it. The toxicology report said Malik was clean. But the autopsy that Brittany was rushing to finalize would probably say otherwise. She needed a doctor to certify the death as accidental or an overdose to get the insurance payout quickly. If the death was ruled a homicide, the insurance money would be frozen during the investigation. She couldn't afford that. She needed a clean death certificate. Dr. Sterling was the key. He wrote the prescription for the paralytic. He probably advised her on the dosage. He was the medical expert in her corner. I looked at the clock. It was 6:00 a.m. The sun was just starting to crack the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray. Dr. Sterling's office would open at 8:00. I wasn't going to call the police yet, not with just this. The police would take weeks to subpoena these records. They would interview Brittany and she would play the grieving widow. She would say the money to her mother was a gift. She would say the jewelry was for investment. She would say the insurance was standard. She would muddy the waters. I needed a confession, or I needed to break the weak link in the chain. Dr. Sterling was a rich doctor with a reputation to protect. He wasn't a hardened criminal like Brittany seemed to be. He was likely greedy and arrogant. Men like that crumble when you show them that their life is about to end. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My stubble was gray. I looked like a man who had lost everything. Good. Let them think I am broken. Let them think I am just a grieving, confused old man. I put my jacket back on. I checked on Keisha and Leo one last time. They were safe for now. I took the laptop and the pill bottle. I walked out to my truck. The morning air was crisp. I had a meeting to attend. Dr. Sterling didn't know it yet, but he was about to have the worst appointment of his career. I wasn't going there as a patient. I was going there as the auditor, and his books were about to be closed, permanently. I parked my truck in the visitor's lot of the Sterling Medical Center at exactly 7:45 in the morning. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel that rose out of the asphalt like a monument to modern medicine and money. It was the kind of place where the valet parking cost more than my hourly wage used to be, and the lobby smelled like white tea and orchids. I sat in the cab for a moment, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and my gray stubble was heavy on my chin. I had not changed out of my funeral suit, which was now wrinkled and smelled faintly of the damp earth from the cemetery. I looked exactly like what I needed to be. A broken, confused, grieving old man. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the crisp morning air. I hunched my shoulders slightly, making myself look smaller, less threatening. I needed Dr. Sterling to underestimate me. I needed him to see a grieving father who was drowning in sorrow, not a state auditor who was hunting for a discrepancy. I walked through the revolving doors and approached the reception desk. The woman behind the marble counter was young, with perfectly manicured nails and a headset that made her look like she was piloting a spaceship. She looked up at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance, as if my rumpled appearance was a stain on her pristine lobby. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice clipped and professional. I cleared my throat, making it sound rough. "I am here to see Dr. Isaac Sterling. I do not have an appointment. My name is Darius Thorne. I am Malik Thorne's father." The receptionist's expression softened just a fraction, but her guard stayed up. "Oh, Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry for your loss. We heard about the tragedy. It was awful." "Thank you," I said, looking down at my hands. "I just need a moment of his time. It is about the funeral arrangements. The pastor needs some paperwork." She hesitated. "Dr. Sterling is fully booked this morning, Mr. Thorne. He usually requires 24 hours notice even for existing patients." "Please," I interrupted, letting a little desperation bleed into my voice. "I just need 5 minutes. I don't know what to do. My son is gone, and I just need some answers for the church." She sighed and tapped something into her computer. "Let me see if he has a gap before his first patient. Take a seat." I sat in one of the low beige armchairs. The waiting room was silent except for the low hum of expensive ventilation. I watched the clock on the wall. Every second that ticked by felt like a hammer hitting my chest. I felt the weight of the pill bottle in my pocket pressing against my ribs. I felt the sharp edge of the folded toxicology report. I was a soldier sitting in enemy territory waiting for the general to show his face. 10 minutes later, the heavy oak door behind the reception desk opened. Dr. Isaac Sterling stepped out. He was a tall man in his late 40s with silver fox hair and a tan that came from winters in St. Bart's, not from working in a garden. He wore a white coat over a bespoke suit that cost more than my truck. He radiated success and arrogance. He looked like the kind of man who played golf on Tuesdays and signed death certificates on Wednesdays without losing a wink of sleep. "Mr. Thorne," he said, walking over to me with his hand extended. His grip was firm, his skin smooth. I was devastated to hear the news. Malik was a troubled soul, but a good man. I stood up, keeping my posture slumped. "Thank you, doctor. It has been very hard." "Come back to my office," Sterling said, gesturing toward the door. "We can talk for a moment." I followed him down a hallway lined with abstract art. His office was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk and gestured for me to sit in one of the leather guest chairs. He did not offer me water. He did not offer me tissue. He just clasped his hands on the desk and looked at me with that practiced doctor look of detached concern. "How can I help you?" Darius Sterling asked. I twisted my hat in my hands. "It is the funeral doctor. The insurance company and the pastor, they are asking questions. They want to know about the cause of death. They are saying it was an overdose, heroin." Sterling nodded slowly. "Yes, that is consistent with the police report. It is a terrible way to go. We see it more and more these days. Professionals, high-functioning men like your son hiding their demons until it is too late." I looked up at him, my eyes wide and watery. "But Malik, he hated needles, doctor. He ran 5 miles a day. He drank kale smoothies. How could he be a heroin addict? I never saw any signs. Sterling sighed, a long, condescending sound that grated on my nerves. Darius addiction is a disease of deception. Malik hid it from you because he was ashamed. He hid it from his wife too until the end. I tried to help him. I prescribed him methadone to help him wean off, but he relapsed. It happens. You cannot blame yourself. You were not close enough to see the signs. My grip on the hat tightened. Not close enough. I talk to my son every day. So you treated him for addiction? I asked. Sterling nodded. For 6 months. He was struggling, Darius. He was in a dark place. He told me he felt a lot of pressure. Pressure from work, pressure from family expectations. He was implying that I was the pressure, that I was the reason my son stuck a needle in his arm. The rage flared in my gut, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed him to say more. I needed him to commit to the lie. So you are saying he was an addict, I repeated, and he died of an overdose, a tragic accident, or suicide, Sterling said softly, dropping his voice to a whisper. We may never know if it was intentional, given his state of mind, his depression. It is possible he just wanted the pain to stop. Suicide. I froze. That was the trap. If it was suicide, the insurance policy would be void in some cases, but if it was an accidental overdose, it would pay out double indemnity. Or maybe they were going for the accident angle to ensure the payout, but keeping suicide as a backup to explain the high levels of drugs. I need the records, I said. I need his medical file, for the peace of mind. I need to see when he came to you. I need to see the test results. Sterling's face hardened. The mask of sympathy vanished, instantly replaced by the stone-cold bureaucracy of a man hiding something. I cannot do that, Mr. Thorne. Patient confidentiality laws are very strict. HIPAA regulations prevent me from sharing his files, even with family, unless you are the executor of his estate. I am his father, I said, my voice rising slightly. It does not matter, Sterling said coldly. Brittany is his wife. She is the executor. She has given strict instructions that his medical history is to remain private to protect his reputation. You need to respect that. You need to let him rest. Stop digging for answers that will only hurt you. Your son was a junkie, Darius. Accept it and move on. There it was. The insult. The dismissal. He looked at me with pure disdain, as if I were a bug he wanted to scrape off his shoe. He thought I was just a sad old black man who couldn't handle the truth about his son. He thought he was untouchable behind his mahogany desk and his medical degrees. I stopped twisting my hat. I set it down on the floor. I sat up straight. The slouch disappeared. The confusion vanished from my eyes. I looked at him, and for the first time he saw the auditor. He saw the man who had stared down corrupt mayors and embezzlement schemes for 40 years. You are lying, Dr. Sterling, I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was granite. Sterling blinked, surprised by the sudden change in my demeanor. Excuse me. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the folded paper. I smoothed it out on his shiny mahogany desk. This is a toxicology report from Quest Diagnostics, I said, pointing to the date. My son went there 3 days ago, 72 hours before he died. He took a 10-panel drug screen. I looked Sterling in the eye. He was clean doctor. No opiates, no methadone, no heroin, nothing. He tested negative for everything. Sterling stared at the paper. His face went pale. That could be faked. Or he could have relapsed immediately after. Addicts are unpredictable. I reached into my pocket again. I pulled out the small orange pill bottle wrapped in my handkerchief. I slammed it down on the desk next to the report. It made a loud plastic rattle. And this, I said. I found this in his garbage can last night, hidden at the bottom of a bag of coffee grounds. Sterling looked at the bottle. His eyes widened. He recognized it. He recognized his own name on the label. Succinylcholine. I read the label out loud. A paralytic agent, used for intubation during surgery. It stops the lungs, it stops the heart. It leaves the patient conscious, but unable to move or scream while they suffocate. I leaned forward. Why did you prescribe a surgical paralytic to an architect doctor? Why is the bottle empty? And why is the date on this bottle the same day my son died? Sterling opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. He looked at the bottle, then at me, then at the door. You poisoned him, I said. You didn't treat him for addiction. You gave Brittany the weapon. You gave her the means to paralyze him so she could inject him with heroin and stage an overdose. This is preposterous, Sterling stammered, but sweat was beading on his forehead. I never prescribed that. That bottle must be stolen or forged. You are crazy. Get out of my office. I pulled out the third piece of paper, the printout of the insurance policy. $3 million, I said. The contestability period ended 2 days before he died. If he dies of a drug accident, the policy pays out. If it is ruled a homicide, the money is frozen. If it is suicide within the window, it is void. But you cooked the books, didn't you? You and Brittany. You created a paper trail of addiction that didn't exist so that when he turned up dead with a needle in his arm, the coroner would look at your notes and say, "Case closed. Just another junkie." I stood up. I loomed over his desk. How much is she paying you, Sterling? Is it a flat fee? Or are you getting a percentage of the $3 million? Sterling stood up, knocking his chair back. It hit the window with a loud thud. His composure was gone. He was a cornered rat in a silk suit. You have no proof, he hissed. That bottle proves nothing. You broke into his house. You stole garbage. That is inadmissible. I will have you arrested. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. I am an auditor doctor. I know how to follow the money. I have already downloaded his bank statements. I see the transfers, I see the cash withdrawals, and I see the pattern. I pointed a finger at him. I am going to the medical board. I am going to the police, and I am going to the insurance investigators. They love fraud cases. They have lawyers who make you look like a saint. By the time I am done with you, you won't be practicing medicine. You will be practicing making license plates in a federal prison. Sterling's hand slammed down on the intercom button on his desk. "Security," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Security to my office immediately. I have a hostile intruder." I picked up my hat. I picked up the pill bottle and the papers. I put them back in my pocket. "You can call security," I said calmly. "You can throw me out. But you cannot throw out the truth. The numbers don't lie, doctor. And your balance sheet is about to turn red." The door burst open. 2 large security guards rushed in. "Get him out of here," Sterling screamed, pointing at me. "He is threatening me. He is crazy." I raised my hands. "I am leaving," I said. I walked past the guards. I walked out of the office, down the hall, and past the receptionist who was staring at me with her mouth open. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was from adrenaline. I had rattled him. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was the weak link. Brittany was cold and calculating, but Sterling was soft. He had too much to lose. I got into my truck. I needed to move fast. Sterling would call Brittany the second I left. They would know I had the evidence. They would know I was coming for them. The timeline had just accelerated. I checked my phone. I had a missed call from my neighbor, and a text message from a number I didn't recognize. I opened the text. It was a photo. It was a photo of my front door. There was a bright orange notice taped to it. I zoomed in. Restraining order. And below that, another paper. Eviction notice. They were moving faster than I thought. They weren't just trying to hide, they were trying to erase me. I started the truck. I had the evidence against the doctor. Now I needed to secure the lawyer before they locked me up or locked me out. The war had just begun. I pulled my truck into the driveway of the modest brick house I had lived in for 30 years. My heart was still racing from the confrontation with Dr. Sterling, but my mind was already moving to the next step. I needed to get the lawyer Javier Rodriguez on the phone. I needed to secure the evidence. But as I walked up the concrete path, I stopped dead. There was a bright orange piece of paper taped to my front door. It fluttered in the cold wind like a warning flag. I knew what it was before I even read the bold black text. It was a temporary restraining order. I ripped it off the wood. The legal language was cold and precise. Brittany Thorne versus Darius Thorne. Allegations of harassment, verbal abuse, and physical intimidation. It stated that I had trespassed on her property, that I had threatened her life, and that I was unstable. It ordered me to stay 500 yards away from her residence, and from any place she might be. She had moved fast. While I was pulling records, she was filing paperwork. She was painting me as the angry, violent father-in-law. She was building a cage around me. I unlocked the door and went inside. I needed money. Lawyers like Rodriguez did not work on credit. I grabbed my wallet and drove to the First National Bank branch on Main Street. I had been banking there since 1985. I knew the branch manager, Susan. She had been at my wife's funeral. I walked up to the teller window. I slid my debit card across the counter. "I need to make a withdrawal," I said. $10,000, cash. The teller, a young man I did not recognize, typed on his keyboard. He frowned. He typed again. Then he looked up at me with an expression of professional apology that I had seen 1,000 times in my career. "I am sorry, Mr. Thorne," he said. "I cannot process this transaction." "Why not?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "It is my money." "Your accounts have been frozen, sir," the teller said. "There is a flag on them, a pending litigation regarding the estate of Malik Thorne." I felt the blood drain from my face. Malik's name was on my main checking account. We had set it up years ago in case of emergencies, so he could help me if I got sick. It was a joint account. "Brittany froze it," I said. The teller nodded uncomfortably. "The petition was filed this morning. Until the probate court resolves the dispute over the estate assets, no funds can be withdrawn by either party." I pulled out my personal credit card. My Visa. It was in my name only. "What about this?" I asked. "Run a cash advance." He swiped the card. The machine beeped. A red light flashed. "Decline," the teller said. I stared at the machine. That card had a $20,000 limit and a zero balance. "Mr. Thorne," the teller said, lowering his voice, "the system shows a default notice. Did you co-sign a loan for your son, a business loan perhaps?" I closed my eyes. 3 years ago, Malik had expanded his architectural firm. He needed capital. I co-signed a line of credit for him. I trusted him. He never missed a payment. But Brittany had access to that line of credit. She maxed it out, I realized. She drained the business credit line. And when Malik died, the bank called the note. Since the accounts are frozen, the payment bounced, and they came after the co-signer. She had thought of everything. She didn't just lock me out of her house. She locked me out of my own life. She stripped me of my liquid assets in a single morning. I was a millionaire on paper, but I couldn't buy a sandwich. I took my card back. "Thank you," I said. I walked out of the bank. The sun was high and bright, but I felt cold. Most men would have panicked. Most men would have gone home and cried or gone to a bar and drank. But I was not most men. I was an auditor. And an auditor knows that you always keep a reserve that is off the books. I drove back to my house. I parked the truck in the garage and closed the door. I went into my bedroom. It was a simple room. A bed, a dresser, a photo of Beatrice on the nightstand. I knelt down beside the bed. I reached under the frame and pulled back the rug. The floorboards looked solid oak, polished and aged. But I knew the secret. I took a flathead screwdriver from my pocket and wedged it into the seam of the third board from the wall. I applied pressure. The board popped up with a groan. Underneath, nestled between the floor joists, was a heavy gray metal lockbox. It was fireproof and waterproof. I dragged it out. It was heavy. I spun the combination dial. Right to 19, left to 58, right to 12. The lid clicked open. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were bundles of $100 bills, and beneath the cash, the dull yellow gleam of gold bars. I had been saving this for 30 years. Every time I did a private consulting job, every time I got a bonus, I took a portion in cash or gold. I didn't trust banks completely. I didn't trust the government completely. I trusted hard assets that I could hold in my hand. I counted the cash quickly. $250,000. Brittany thought she had cut off my supply lines. She thought she had starved me out. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. I wasn't just fighting with my pension. I was fighting with a war chest. I took a canvas duffel bag from the closet. I loaded the cash and the gold into it. I zipped it up. It weighed 40 pounds. It felt like justice. I stood up and looked around the room. I might not be coming back here for a long time. I took the photo of Beatrice. I kissed her glass cheek. "Watch over us, Bea," I whispered. "I am going to get our boy justice." I walked out of the house with the bag over my shoulder. I had the money. Now I could get the lawyer. And once I had Rodriguez, Brittany would find out that she wasn't the only one who knew how to play dirty. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I climbed into the truck. It was a text message from Etta Johnson. Just 3 words. "They are here." I dropped the phone. I slammed the truck into reverse and tore out of the driveway. I didn't care about speed limits. I didn't care about red lights. The hunter had just become the hunted. And the target wasn't me. It was the little boy who looked just like my son. I drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gripping the duffel bag on the seat beside me. My mind was racing, analyzing the text message. They are here. Etta was supposed to be at home. Keisha and Leo were at the Motel 6. Why was Etta texting me? Had she gone to the motel, or had she gone back to her house? I called Etta. It went straight to voicemail. I cursed and threw the phone onto the seat. I steered the truck toward the north side of town, toward Etta's small bungalow. If Brittany had found Etta, she was trying to find the boy. Brittany was smart. She realized that I hadn't just disappeared. She realized I had help. She probably checked Malik's phone records or his emails and found a connection to his old teacher. Or maybe she hired a private investigator who was worth his salt. If she found out about Leo, she loses everything. The insurance policy, the house, the assets, all of it would go to the child. She would be left with nothing but debt and a prison sentence. Leo was a walking, talking death sentence for her lifestyle. She had to remove him. I turned the corner onto Etta's street. I slowed down, killing the lights. I coasted to a stop 3 houses down. There was a black sedan parked in front of Etta's house. It was a nondescript American car, the kind rental agencies use. But there were 2 men sitting in the front seat. They weren't police. Police don't slouch like that. They were private security or hired muscle. I watched them. One of the men was talking on a cell phone, looking at Etta's front door. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Etta. Men outside, asking about a child. I locked the doors. They are walking around back. Panic surged in my chest. Etta was in there alone. But where were Keisha and Leo? Had they gone to Etta's instead of staying at the motel? I texted back. Are Keisha and Leo with you? The dots appeared. Then the answer. Yes. Leo got scared at the motel. We came here. Mistake. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel. It was a mistake. A fatal mistake. The motel was anonymous. Etta's house was a known location. I looked at the black sedan. The passenger door opened. A large man in a cheap suit got out. He walked up the driveway toward Etta's front door. He didn't knock. He started trying to peer through the windows. He went to the side gate and unlatched it. He was going into the backyard. I couldn't call the police. The police were on Brittany's side right now. If they came, they would find a fugitive grandfather and a secret child, and Brittany would spin a story about kidnapping. She would get custody of Leo, and he would disappear into the foster system, or worse. I had to get them out myself. I looked at the layout of the street. Etta's house had a back alley used for trash collection. It was narrow and unpaved. If I could get the truck back there, I could get them out the back door while the goons were busy at the front. But the goon was already in the backyard. I needed a distraction. I looked at the black sedan. The driver was still inside, looking down at his phone. I grabbed the tire iron from under the seat. I took a deep breath. I was 66 years old. I was too old for this, but I didn't have a choice. I started the truck. I turned on the high beams. I slammed on the gas. I drove straight at the black sedan. At the last second, I swerved. I clipped the side mirror of the sedan with a loud crunch of metal and plastic. I kept going, driving up onto the curb and smashing into the neighbors' metal trash cans, sending them clattering loudly down the driveway. I screeched to a halt 20 yards away. I jumped out of the truck, screaming like a crazy old man. My brakes failed. Help me. The driver of the sedan jumped out. What the hell is wrong with you, old man? The goon in the backyard heard the crash. He came running back out to the front street to see what was happening. That was my window. I pulled out my phone and texted Keisha. Back door now. Run to the alley. Blue truck. Ooh. I kept yelling at the sedan driver, waving my arms, creating a scene. The goon joined him, looking at the damage to their car. They were distracted. They were looking at me, not the house. I saw movement in the alleyway behind the house. Keisha burst out the back gate carrying Leo. Etta was behind her. I stopped yelling. I jumped back into my truck. I threw it into reverse. The tires smoked as I backed up the street away from the sedan. Hey, where are you going? The driver shouted. I spun the truck around and gunned it toward the alley entrance. I swung the truck into the narrow lane. Keisha and Etta were running toward me. I slammed on the brakes. Get in! I shouted, leaning across to open the passenger door. Keisha threw herself inside with Leo. Etta scrambled into the back seat. The 2 goons appeared at the mouth of the alley. They saw us. They started running toward the truck, reaching into their jackets for something. Guns. I floored it. The truck kicked up gravel and dust. We bounced down the alleyway, scraping the sides of fences. I saw the men receding in the rearview mirror. They stopped running. They were running back to their car. We burst out onto the next street. I took a hard left, then a hard right, zigzagging through the neighborhood to lose them. Is everyone okay? I asked, gasping for breath. Keisha was hugging Leo tight. He was crying softly. We are okay, she said. Mr. Thorne, they knew. They knew we were there. They are tracking us, I said. Or they tracked you. Get rid of your phone, Keisha, now. She looked at me shocked. But all my photos. Throw it out the window, I ordered. They are pinging the GPS. That is how they found the motel. That is how they found Edda's. She rolled down the window and threw her phone into a storm drain as we sped past. I drove for an hour making sure we weren't followed. I drove out of the city limits toward the industrial district near the airport. There was a hotel there, a place that took cash and didn't ask questions. A place used by truckers and people who didn't want to be found. I pulled into the parking lot of the Sleep Inn. It was run down, but it was safe. I gave Keisha a handful of cash from the duffel bag. Get a room, I said. Use a fake name. Pay for a week. Do not turn on the TV. Do not use the phone. I will come back for you. Where are you going? Edda asked from the back seat. I have an appointment, I said. I patted the duffel bag. With a shark. I dropped them off and watched them enter the hotel room safely. Then I drove back toward the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of blood. I had the money. I had the evidence. I had the witnesses safe. Now I needed the weapon. I drove to the office of Javier Rodriguez. It was in a glass building downtown. His name was on the door in gold letters. He was the most expensive criminal defense attorney in the state. He was known for being ruthless, aggressive, and brilliant. He was exactly what I needed. I walked into his reception area carrying the duffel bag. The receptionist looked up. I don't have an appointment, I said, setting the heavy bag on her desk. She started to protest. Sir, Mr. Rodriguez is very busy. I unzipped the bag just enough to show the stacks of $100 bills. Tell him Darius Thorne is here, I said, and tell him I want to hire him to prosecute a murder. Her eyes widened. She picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, the double doors opened. A man in a sharp Italian suit stood there. He looked at me. He looked at the bag. He smiled a smile that was all teeth. Come in, Mr. Thorne, he said. Let's talk about justice. I left the office of Javier Rodriguez with a clear mission. The lawyer had been blunt. He told me that the police report was the shield Brittany was hiding behind. As long as the official record stated that Malik died of an overdose, she was the grieving widow and I was the delusional father. We needed to shatter that narrative. We needed to find the cracks in the story. And the biggest crack was the timeline. The police report stated that Malik was last seen alive at 8 in the evening by a friend named Trey Davis. The report claimed they were at a bar downtown and that Malik had left abruptly saying he needed to score. I knew Trey Davis. He grew up 3 streets over from our house. He and Malik had been inseparable since kindergarten. They played basketball in my driveway until the streetlights came on. I had driven Trey to football practice. I had fed him dinner more times than I could count. He was like a second son to me. If Malik was in trouble, Trey would know. But if Malik was clean, Trey was lying. I drove to the trendy downtown district where Trey lived. He rented a loft in a converted warehouse, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and high rents that young professionals flocked to. It was a long way from the neighborhood where he grew up. I parked my truck between a Tesla and a Range Rover. I felt out of place in my funeral suit, which was now wrinkled and stained with sweat, but I did not care. I was not there to impress anyone. I was there to get the truth. I waited by the front door until a delivery driver came out and I caught the heavy steel door before it latched. I walked into the lobby. It smelled of industrial cleaner and expensive coffee. I checked the directory. Davis 4B. I took the elevator up. My heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I wanted to believe Trey was innocent. I wanted to believe he had been duped. But my years as an auditor had taught me that people usually act in their own self-interest, especially when money is involved. I knocked on the door. It took a long time for it to open. I could hear shuffling inside and the sound of a television being muted. Finally, the lock turned. The door opened a crack. Trey peered out. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and he had dark circles under them. He was wearing boxer shorts and a silk robe that looked brand new. When he saw me, his face went pale. He tried to close the door, but I jammed my boot into the gap. Mr. Thorne, he stammered, his voice shaking. I was not expecting you. I am so sorry for your loss. I was going to call you, but I just couldn't. It is too messed up. I pushed the door open, forcing him to stumble back. I walked into the apartment. It was a large open space with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was messy. There were takeout boxes on the coffee table and empty beer bottles on the counter. But what struck me was the smell. It didn't smell like grief. It smelled like a party that had ended late. We need to talk, Trey, I said, my voice low and steady. I stood in the middle of his living room looking around. The furniture was modern and expensive. There was a massive 60-inch television screen mounted on the brick wall. A new gaming system sat underneath it, still in its box. Trey pulled his robe tighter around himself. "Can we do this another time, Mr. Thorne? I am really not feeling well. I haven't slept since it happened." I ignored him. I walked over to the window. "You told the police Malik was buying drugs," I said. "You told them he left the bar to go meet a dealer. Is that true, Trey? Look me in the eye and tell me my son was a junkie." Trey looked at the floor. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He mumbled. "He was stressed out, man. Work was killing him. Brittany was riding him hard. He just wanted to take the edge off. I tried to stop him. I told him not to go. But he wouldn't listen. Lies." I could hear the rehearsed cadence in his voice. He was reciting a script. Malik didn't handle stress with drugs. He handled it with running. He handled it with planning. I turned away from the window and looked at the kitchen island. It was a slab of white marble cluttered with mail and keys. And there, sitting right on top of a stack of overdue bills, was something that made the air leave my lungs. It was a key fob, black leather with a gold crest, the crest of a Porsche. I walked over to the counter. Trey moved to intercept me, but I shot him a look that froze him in his tracks. I picked up the keys. The leather was worn smooth. I knew these keys. I knew them because I had held the flashlight while Malik worked on the engine of that 1982 Porsche 911 Targa for 3 years. It was his pride and joy. He kept it in a climate-controlled garage. He barely drove it because he was terrified of scratching the paint. He certainly wouldn't drive it to a dive bar to buy heroin. "Why do you have my son's car, Trey?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more weight than a scream. Trey's eyes darted around the room looking for an exit. "Oh, that. He let me borrow it. A few days ago. He said his SUV was in the shop and he wanted me to keep the Porsche safe. He handed me the keys on Tuesday. Tuesday. The day he died." "You are lying," I said. "Malik would never let you drive this car. You stripped the gears on my truck when you were 16. He didn't trust you behind the wheel of a go-kart, let alone a vintage sports car." I gripped the keys in my fist. The metal bit into my palm. "Did you steal it?" I asked, stepping closer to him. "Did you take it from his pocket after he died? Is that what you did? You robbed his corpse." "No," Trey shouted, backing away until he hit the refrigerator. "No, I didn't steal it. It was a gift. A gift," I repeated. "Who gave it to you?" He clamped his mouth shut. He realized he had said too much. Sweat was beading on his forehead. I closed the distance between us. "I am 66 years old. I have arthritis in my knees and my back hurts every morning. But in that moment I was filled with the strength of a father avenging his child. I grabbed Trey by the lapels of his expensive silk robe and slammed him against the stainless steel fridge. Photographs and magnets rained down on the floor around us. "Listen to me, you little traitor." I growled, my face inches from his. "I know Malik didn't overdose. I have the toxicology report. I know he was poisoned, and I know Brittany did it." Trey's eyes went wide with terror. He started to shake. "You are an accessory to murder, Trey," I said. "Do you know what happens to accessories in a capital murder case? They go to prison for life. They never see the sun again. Is this apartment worth dying in prison for? Is that car worth it?" He started to cry. Snot and tears ran down his face. "I didn't know," he sobbed. "I didn't know she was going to kill him. I swear, Mr. Thorne, she just told me he needed to go away." "She," I said, tightening my grip. "Brittany." "Yes," he choked out. "Brittany. She came to me the morning after. She gave me the keys. She signed the title over to me. She said Malik was gone and he wouldn't need it anymore. She said she needed a favor. What favor, I demanded. She told me to tell the police he was using again," Trey whispered. "She said if I told them he was buying drugs, the investigation would close fast and everyone could move on. She said she would give me the car and $10,000 cash if I just stuck to the story." I felt a wave of nausea. My son's best friend. The boy I watched grow up. He had sold Malik's memory and his justice for a used car and a stack of cash. Brittany had bought him like a cheap suit. "Where is the cash?" I asked. "It is in the bedroom," Trey said, weeping. "In the shoebox under the bed." "Please don't hurt me, Mr. Thorne." I was scared. She said she has powerful friends. She said if I didn't take the deal, I would get dragged into it anyway. I let him go. He slid down the front of the refrigerator and collapsed on the floor, burying his face in his hands. He was pathetic, a weak, greedy man who had been manipulated by a predator. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. The voice recorder app had been running since I walked in the door. "Did you get that?" I asked the empty room. Trey looked up. "You recorded me. Every word I said." I looked down at him with pure disgust. "You are going to stay right here, Trey. You are not going to call Brittany. You are not going to call anyone. If you leave this apartment, I will give this recording to the police, and I will tell them you were the one who injected him. I will pin the whole thing on you. Do you understand?" He nodded frantically, wiping his nose. "I won't move. I swear." I walked to the bedroom. I found the shoebox. Inside was a stack of $100 bills wrapped in a rubber band. $10,000. The price of a man's soul. I left the money there. It was evidence. I walked back to the living room. Trey was still on the floor sobbing. "Get up," I said. He scrambled to his feet. "We are going to the police station," I said. "Not now, but soon. You are going to tell them exactly what you told me. You are going to recant your statement, and you are going to give them the car keys." "But she will kill me," he whispered. "She is done killing people," I said. "Because I am coming for her." I turned and walked out of the apartment. I took the Porsche keys with me. They felt heavy in my pocket. I walked back to my truck in a daze. The betrayal cut deep, but it also clarified everything. Brittany had covered her tracks by buying off everyone around her. She used greed as a weapon, but greed leaves a paper trail. It leaves witnesses. And now I had the witness. I had the confession. Brittany thought she had checkmated me. She thought I was locked out and broke. She didn't know that I had just captured her queen. I sat in my truck and called Javier Rodriguez. "I have the witness," I said when he answered. He admitted she bribed him to lie to the cops. "Good," Rodriguez said. His voice was sharp and energized. "Bring me the recording. We are going to need it." She just filed an emergency motion. "What kind of motion?" I asked, starting the engine. "She is trying to cremate the body," Rodriguez said. "She scheduled it for tomorrow morning. She claims it is for religious reasons. She wants to burn the evidence, Darius. We have less than 12 hours to stop her." I slammed the truck into gear. The Porsche keys rattled in my pocket. "Let's go to court," I said. I sat in my truck outside the apartment building where I had just left Trey and stared at the phone in my hand. My thumb hovered over Brittany's number. This was the hardest phone call I would ever have to make. I had to swallow my pride. I had to swallow my rage. I had to become the beaten dog she thought I was. I had to make her believe that she had won so completely that she would get careless. I dialed the number. She answered on the second ring. "Well, if it isn't my favorite trespasser," she said. Her voice was light and airy, like she hadn't just framed her husband as a junkie. "What do you want, Darius? Are you calling to apologize before I file that restraining order permanently?" I let out a long, ragged sigh. I let my voice crack. "You win, Brittany. I am tired. I am an old man and I cannot fight you anymore. The police scared me. I do not want to go to jail." There was a pause on the other end. I could practically hear her smiling. "I am glad you finally came to your senses, Darius. It is better this way. Malik would want us to move on." "Stop it," I said, making my voice sound desperate. "Do not talk about him. Just listen. I know about the insurance policy. I know about the $3 million. Her tone shifted instantly. It became sharp and businesslike. "That is none of your business." "That is spousal support, I know," I said. "But I also know that if I keep making noise, if I keep demanding autopsies and investigations, the insurance company will hold that check for months, maybe years. You have debts, Brittany. I know about the credit cards. You cannot afford to wait years." "What are you proposing?" she asked suspiciously. "I want a cut," I said. I felt dirty just saying the words, but I pushed through. "I am broke. You froze my accounts. You ruined my credit. I need to retire. Give me $100,000 from the payout, cash. In exchange, I will sign the waiver on the house. I will tell the insurance investigators it was an accident. I will disappear." "100,000, she mused. "That is a lot of money for silence." "It is pennies compared to 3 million, I countered. "Do you want the money next week or do you want it in 3 years? It is your choice." "Fine," she said. "Meet me at Le Jardin in 1 hour. If you look at me wrong, if you raise your voice, I will call the cops and have you arrested for violating the restraining order." I hung up. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and breathed. I had to be perfect. One slip, and she would walk. I checked the small pen camera I had bought at a spy shop years ago for an undercover audit. I clipped it into my jacket pocket. I taped a wire recorder to my chest. I called Javier Rodriguez. She took the bait I told him. "Be at Le Jardin an hour. Get a table near the back." I walked into the restaurant an hour later. It was the kind of place where they served water in crystal glasses and the menu didn't have prices. Brittany was already there, sitting at a corner booth wearing a white silk blouse that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She looked radiant. She looked like a woman who had just won the lottery. She didn't look like a woman whose husband was in the morgue. I walked over to the table, walking with a stoop, letting my shoulders slump. I sat down opposite her. She didn't offer a menu. She didn't offer a greeting. She just took a sip of her champagne and looked at me with amusement. "You look terrible, Darius," she said. "Grief really ages a person, doesn't it?" "I just want this to be over," I said, keeping my voice low. "I just want the money and I want out." She reached into her purse and pulled out a document. It was the waiver for the house. "Sign this," she said. "Then we can talk about your finder's fee." I picked up the pen. My hand trembled. I made sure she saw the tremor. I signed the paper. I pushed it back to her. "There," I said. "Now tell me, how long until the insurance pays out?" She tucked the paper into her purse, smiling like a shark. "Dr. Sterling expedited the death certificate. He listed it as accidental overdose. The insurance company has already approved the claim. I should have the funds by Friday. Dr. Sterling is a good friend," I said, fishing. "He must be expensive. He is worth every penny," she said, swirling her glass. "He understands that sometimes people need help moving on. He is very discreet." I leaned in closer. "But the toxicology report," I whispered. "What if they find out he wasn't using? What if they find the other stuff?" Brittany laughed. It was a soft, chilling sound. "You are so naive, Darius. There is no other stuff. Malik was weak. He was pathetic. Honestly, I did him a favor. He was miserable. He was going to leave me. Did you know that? He was going to try and take everything. I couldn't let that happen." "So you fixed it," I said. "You and Sterling." She leaned across the table. Her eyes were cold and dead. "You want to know the truth, old man, since you are leaving anyway." "Yes. We fixed it." Sterling made a cocktail. Succinylcholine. It is elegant, really. It paralyzes the muscles. It stops the breathing. But it metabolizes so fast that by the time the coroner looks at him, it is gone. It leaves no trace. Just like a heart attack. Just like an overdose. My heart was hammering against the wire taped to my chest. I had it. She had named the drug. She had named the doctor. She had admitted it was murder. But I needed one more thing. I needed her to confirm the motive. "You killed him for the money," I said. "I killed him because he was in my way," she hissed. "And because I deserved that money. I put up with his boring lectures and his cheap lifestyle for 2 years. I earned every dollar. Now stop asking questions. You will get your check when I get mine. Now get out of my sight. You smell like poverty." I stood up. I didn't say another word. I didn't look back. I walked out of the restaurant past the table where Javier Rodriguez was sitting drinking an espresso. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He had heard everything. I walked out into the cool night air. I felt lighter. I felt clean. The act was over. I had the confession. I had the weapon. I had the witness. I was ready to bring the hammer down. But as I reached my truck, my phone rang. It was Javier. "Darius, we have a problem," he said. His voice was urgent. "What is it?" I asked. "Did the recording fail?" "No, the recording is perfect," Javier said. "But I just checked the court docket. Brittany filed an emergency motion an hour ago. She is petitioning for an immediate cremation of Malik's body." "Cremation," I shouted. "But we need the autopsy." "She knows that," Javier said. "She is claiming religious distress. She says she cannot grieve while his body is in limbo. She has a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning at 8:00 a.m. If the judge grants it, Malik will be ash by noon. And the physical evidence of the succinylcholine will be gone forever." I gripped the door handle. "She is trying to burn the evidence. We have to stop her," Javier said. "Meet me at the courthouse at 7:00 a.m. Bring everything you have. Bring the DNA results. Bring the recording of Trey. Bring the journal. We are going to war, Darius, and we cannot lose this one." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hotel room with Keisha and Leo watching the clock tick down. Every minute felt like an hour. I looked at my grandson sleeping peacefully. If they burned Malik's body, we might never be able to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. We might get her on fraud, but she could walk on the killing, and Malik would never get justice. At 6:30 a.m. I put on my suit. It was the same suit I wore to the funeral. It was my armor. I kissed Leo on the forehead. I will be back, I told Keisha, and I am bringing good news. I drove to the courthouse. The sky was gray and heavy with rain. Javier was waiting for me on the steps. He looked sharp and ready. He had a briefcase in one hand and a coffee in the other. She has a good lawyer, Javier warned me, a shark named Templeton. He is going to play the sympathy card. He is going to paint you as a disruptive, estranged father. You have to keep your cool. I am cool, I said. I am ice. We walked into the courtroom. It was empty except for the judge, the bailiff, and the defense table. Brittany was there. She was wearing a modest gray dress today, looking pale and fragile. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Her lawyer Templeton was whispering to her, patting her hand. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed. She didn't expect me to be here. She thought I was waiting for my payoff. She realized in that moment that the meeting at the restaurant was a setup. But she didn't know how deep the trap went. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. Judge Henrietta Vance walked in. She was a stern woman with a reputation for being tough on family disputes. She sat down and looked over her glasses at us. "We are here on an emergency petition regarding the remains of Malik Thorne," she said. "Mr. Templeton, please proceed." Templeton stood up. "Your Honor, my client is devastated. She has lost her husband in a tragic accident. All she wants is to lay him to rest according to his wishes. She wants to cremate him and scatter his ashes at their favorite vacation spot. But his father, Mr. Thorne, has been obstructing her at every turn. He has harassed her. He has trespassed on her property. He is using his son's body as a pawn in a sick game of control. We ask that you grant the cremation order immediately so this poor woman can find peace." Brittany let out a sob. It was perfectly timed. Judge Vance looked at me. "Mr. Thorne, why are you objecting to the widow's wishes?" Javier stood up. "Your Honor, we are objecting because this is not an accident. This is a crime scene, and the body is the primary evidence." Templeton jumped up. "Objection. This is hearsay. The police ruled it an overdose." "It was not an overdose," Javier said, his voice booming. "We have evidence that the deceased was poisoned. If you allow this cremation, you are allowing the destruction of evidence in a capital murder case." The judge raised an eyebrow. "That is a serious accusation, counselor. Do you have proof?" "We do," Javier said. Brittany stopped crying. She stared at us. Javier pulled a folder from his briefcase. "We have a toxicology report from 3 days prior to the death showing the deceased was clean. We have a witness statement from a Mr. Trey Davis admitting he was bribed by the widow to lie to the police about the deceased's drug use." Brittany gasped. She gripped the table. "And Your Honor," Javier continued, "we have something else. We have a motive." He motioned to the back of the courtroom. I stood up. I walked to the gallery doors and opened them. Keisha walked in holding Leo's hand. The courtroom went silent. Brittany turned around. When she saw the boy, the color drained from her face completely. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Who is this?" the judge asked. "This is Leo Thorne," I said, my voice steady and loud. "This is Malik's son, my grandson, and he is the sole legal heir to Malik's estate under the laws of intestacy if the current will is proven fraudulent." Templeton looked at Brittany. She was shaking her head mutely. "Your Honor," Javier said, "Brittany Miller knew about this child. She knew that if Malik divorced her, she would get nothing. She knew that the life insurance policy had a contestability clause that expired 2 days ago. She murdered her husband to secure the payout before he could change his will and acknowledge his son. If you burn that body, you are burning the truth," Templeton stammered. This is an ambush. We have no proof of paternity." I pulled a paper from my pocket. "I have the DNA test results right here," I said, slamming it onto the defense table. "It is a 99.9% match. He is Malik's son." Judge Vance looked at Brittany. She looked at the terrified woman who was no longer crying. She looked at the little boy who looked exactly like the man in the obituary photo on her desk. "The cremation order is denied," Judge Vance said, slamming her gavel. "I am ordering an immediate independent autopsy to be performed by the state medical examiner. and I am issuing an injunction freezing all assets of the estate until this matter is resolved." Brittany screamed. It wasn't a sad scream. It was a scream of pure rage. She lunged across the table at me, her nails aiming for my face. "You ruined everything," she shrieked. "You old fool. You ruined everything." The bailiff grabbed her and pulled her back. I looked at her calm and cold. "I didn't ruin anything, Brittany," I said. "I just balanced the books." The judge looked down at Brittany with disgust. "Bailiff, escort Mrs. Thorne out of the courtroom and notify the district attorney's office. I want them to see this evidence immediately." Brittany was dragged out screaming curses. I turned to Keisha and Leo. I knelt down and hugged my grandson. "It is over," I whispered. "He is safe now. We got them." But it wasn't quite over. We had stopped the fire. Now we had to bring the lightning. We had to wait for the autopsy results. And we had to catch Dr. Sterling before he ran. The final act was about to begin. I sat on the hard plastic bench in the hallway of the state medical examiner's office, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. The air smelled of antiseptic and cold coffee, a smell that sticks to your clothes and reminds you of death. Beside me, little Leo was swinging his legs back and forth, his small hand gripping my thumb so tight his knuckles were white. He did not understand why we were here in this gray building with no windows, but he understood the tension. Children are like barometers for fear. Keisha sat on the other side of him, her head bowed in silent prayer, her lips moving without sound. Javier Rodriguez paced the length of the corridor, his Italian leather shoes clicking a sharp rhythm against the tiles. Every time the double doors at the end of the hall swung open, we all flinched, hoping it was the news we needed. This was the longest wait of my life. Longer than the nights I spent waiting for Malik to come home as a teenager. Longer than the nights I sat by Beatrice's hospital bed. Because this wait wasn't just about grief, it was about justice. Inside that room, a team of forensic pathologists was cutting into my son's body, searching for the invisible weapon that had killed him. If they found nothing, Brittany would walk free. She would claim it was a natural heart attack or a mysterious accident, and she would take the money and the house and erase my son's legacy. The weight of that possibility pressed down on my chest like a physical stone. I looked at Leo. He was the only reason I was still breathing. I squeezed his hand gently. I promised him silently that I would not let the monster who took his father win. Javier stopped pacing and checked his watch. "It has been 4 hours, Darius," he said, his voice low. "That is a good sign. If it was a simple overdose, they would have been done in an hour. They are digging deep. They are looking for the needle in the haystack." I nodded, but I could not speak. My throat was too tight. I kept replaying the image of that empty pill bottle in the trash can. Succinylcholine, the ghost drug. It metabolizes in minutes, leaving the bloodstream almost instantly. If they had cremated him, the evidence would have vanished into smoke. Even now, days later, it was a gamble. We were betting everything on tissue samples and injection site residue. I closed my eyes and prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Just let them find it. Please let them find it. The double doors swung open with a heavy thud. Dr. Eris Thorne, the chief medical examiner, stepped out. He was a small man with thick glasses and a lab coat stained with chemical reagents. He pulled his mask down and looked straight at me. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked resolved. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "Mr. Rodriguez, please come into my office." We stood up. Keisha grabbed Leo. We walked into the small, cluttered office lined with textbooks on anatomy and toxicology. Dr. Thorne sat behind his desk and opened a file folder. He adjusted his glasses. We ran the standard panel first, he began. Negative for heroin, negative for fentanyl, negative for cocaine. Your son was clean, Mr. Thorne, just as you said. I let out a breath that was half sob. I knew it. But Dr. Thorne continued, raising a hand. We ran a targeted liquid chromatography mass spectrometry test, specifically looking for neuromuscular blocking agents based on the evidence you provided regarding the prescription bottle. He turned the file around so we could see the graph. It showed a sharp red spike. We found high concentrations of succinylmonocholine and succinic acid in the tissue surrounding a puncture wound in his left arm, he said. These are the breakdown products of succinylcholine. We also found trace amounts in his liver. He looked up at us. This was not a recreational overdose. This was a clinical execution. Someone injected him with a lethal dose of a surgical paralytic. He would have been fully conscious, unable to move, unable to breathe while he suffocated. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes to die. The room went silent. The horror of it was absolute. My son had died terrified and paralyzed, looking into the eyes of his murderer. Keisha let out a small whimper and covered her mouth. Javier slammed his hand on the desk. "That is it," he said. "That is capital murder. We have the cause. We have the weapon. We have the prescription linked to Sterling." Dr. Thorne nodded. "I have already sent the preliminary findings to the district attorney and the homicide division. They are issuing the warrants as we speak. This is no longer a civil dispute, gentlemen. This is a manhunt." I stood up. My legs felt steady for the first time in a week. The grief was still there, a deep ocean of sadness, but the uncertainty was gone. Now there was only the mission. "Let's go," I said to Javier. "I want to be there when they take her down." We drove to Wisteria Lane in a convoy. Javier and I were in my truck following 3 unmarked police cruisers and a SWAT van. It was 8 o'clock at night. The sky was pitch black, but the neighborhood was glowing. As we turned onto the street, I saw why. Brittany's house was lit up like a Christmas tree. There were cars parked all along the driveway and the street. Music was thumping from inside a heavy bass beat that rattled my windows. She was having a party. She thought she had won. She thought the delay with the cremation was just a bureaucratic hiccup. She thought her high-priced lawyer would smooth it all over. So she was celebrating. She was drinking champagne in the house my son paid for, dancing on his grave before the dirt was even settled. The arrogance of it made my blood boil, but it also made the moment sweeter. The police cut their sirens as they approached. They wanted the element of surprise. They pulled up to this curb, blocking the driveway. The SWAT team piled out, moving with silent precision. They wore tactical gear and carried battering rams. I parked across the street. I got out and stood by the hood of my truck. I wanted to see this. I needed to see this. The lead detective, the same man who had arrested me for trespassing just days ago, walked up to the front door. He didn't knock. He signaled the team. Crash. The sound of the front door splintering echoed down the quiet street. The music cut off instantly. There were screams from inside. I saw guests running past the windows, their shadows frantic and confused. Police search warrant, get on the ground. The shouts drifted out into the night air. I watched the front door. A few minutes passed. Minutes that felt like justice being served 1 second at a time. Then the officers started bringing people out. They escorted the party guests out first, young men and women in expensive clothes, looking terrified and confused, holding their drinks as if they didn't know what to do with them. And then they brought her out. Brittany. She was wearing a red dress, a bright scarlet cocktail dress that looked like blood under the porch lights. She wasn't crying this time. She was screaming. She was fighting. 2 officers had her by the arms, dragging her down the steps. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared. She looked wild. "Get your hands off me," she shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I will sue you. I will sue this entire department." The detective walked behind her, carrying a plastic evidence bag. Inside it was a half-empty bottle of wine and a set of keys. "Brittany Miller," he said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "you are under arrest for the first-degree murder of Malik Thorne and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent." He spun her around and slammed her against the hood of the police car, the same car I had been slammed against. He pulled her arms back. The metallic click of the handcuffs was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. She looked up then. She looked across the street, and she saw me. I was standing there in the shadows, watching her. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood there, tall and unbroken. Her eyes went wide. She stopped screaming. She stared at me with a look of pure hatred and dawning realization. She knew. In that moment, she knew that the old man she had underestimated, the man she had dismissed as a nuisance, had dismantled her entire life piece by piece. She tried to lunge at me, but the cuffs held her back. "You!" she hissed. "You ruined everything." I didn't say a word. I just watched as they shoved her into the back of the cruiser. She thrashed against the seat, kicking the window like a trapped animal. Another squad car pulled up. They pulled a man out of the back seat of a luxury sedan parked nearby. It was Dr. Sterling. He had been at the party too. He looked like he was going to vomit. He was weeping openly, his expensive suit rumpled, his hands cuffed behind his back. He saw me and looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The detective walked over to me. "Mr. Thorne," he said, tipping his head respectfully. "We found the rest of the succinylcholine in a safe in the master bedroom. along with a burner phone linking her to Sterling. "It is over. We have them cold." "Thank you, Detective," I said. He nodded and walked away. The cruisers started to pull out their lights, flashing red and blue against the night. The neighbors were all outside now, watching the spectacle, whispering and pointing. The show was over. The queen had fallen. I got back into my truck. I felt a deep exhaustion settle into my bones, but it was a good tired. It was the tired of a man who had finished a long, hard job. I drove back to the hotel where Keisha and Leo were waiting. When I walked into the room, Keisha jumped up. Her eyes were wide with questions. I nodded. "They got her. She is in jail. And Sterling, too." Keisha collapsed onto the bed, sobbing with relief. Leo woke up and rubbed his eyes. "Grandpa," he said sleepily. I walked over and picked him up. I held him tight. "It is okay, Leo," I whispered into his hair. "The bad people are gone. We are going home." But the war wasn't completely over. There was still the trial. There was still the final act where I had to stand in front of a judge and make sure she never saw the light of day again. And I had one last card to play, a card that Malik had left for us, a final surprise that would ensure his son's future was secure forever. I looked at the journal on the table. Tucked in the back pocket was a document I hadn't shown anyone yet, not even Javier. It was the trust document. The ironclad trust. Malik had been smarter than any of us knew. And when I read it in court, Brittany wasn't just going to go to prison, she was going to lose her mind. The criminal trial began 3 months after the arrest, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was suffocating. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters from national news outlets lined the back walls, their cameras prohibited but their notebooks open and waiting. The story of the grieving widow who murdered her architect husband for an insurance payout had captivated the state. I sat in the front row directly behind the prosecutor's table. Keisha sat beside me holding my hand. We had decided to leave Leo with Mrs. Johnson for the trial. No child should have to see the face of the woman who killed his father. I looked at the defense table. Brittany sat there looking like a completely different woman from the one who had screamed at me on her front porch. She was wearing a modest cream-colored cardigan and a long skirt. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and she wore no makeup. She looked young, innocent, and terrified. It was her best performance yet. Her lawyer Templeton stood before the jury. He was a man who specialized in creating doubt where there was none. He paced back and forth, his voice smooth and hypnotic. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, gesturing toward Brittany. "You are going to hear a lot of terrible things during this trial. You are going to hear about poison and insurance policies. But I ask you to look at my client. Does she look like a mastermind? Does she look like a killer? No. Brittany Thorne is a victim. She is a victim of a manipulative relationship, and she is a victim of a corrupt doctor who took advantage of her grief and confusion." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. He was spinning a narrative that made my blood boil. Templeton continued. "The prosecution wants you to believe that Brittany orchestrated this entire event. But the truth is much simpler and much more tragic. Brittany Thorne trusted Dr. Isaac Sterling. She went to him because her husband was suffering. She thought she was getting help. She thought she was getting medication to help Malik with his back pain. She had no idea what was in that syringe. She is not a doctor. She is just a loving wife who was handed a loaded weapon by a man she was told to trust. Dr. Sterling is the villain here, not this grieving widow. It was a bold strategy. Throw the doctor under the bus, claim ignorance, play the fool. I watched the jury. A few of them were nodding. They looked at Brittany wiping a single tear from her cheek, and they saw a girl who got caught up in something she didn't understand. Templeton was good. He was painting a picture where Brittany was just a bystander in her own husband's murder. But we had a weapon that Templeton couldn't talk his way out of. The prosecutor stood up. He was a young man named Anderson, sharp and hungry. He adjusted his tie and looked at the judge. "The people call Dr. Isaac Sterling to the stand," he announced. A murmur went through the courtroom. The double doors opened and 2 bailiffs escorted Sterling into the room. He was wearing an orange prison jumpsuit. His tan was gone, leaving his skin sallow and gray. His silver hair was unkempt. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. He had taken a plea deal. 20 years for second-degree murder and loss of his medical license in exchange for his testimony against Brittany. He had nothing left to lose, except the truth. He took the stand. He swore to tell the truth. He sat down and looked directly at Brittany. There was no love in his eyes now. Only the cold hatred of a man looking at the person who destroyed his life. Dr. Sterling, the prosecutor asked, "Did Brittany Thorne know what was in the bottle you gave her?" "Yes," Sterling said, his voice raspy. "She knew exactly what it was." "Did she ask for pain medication?" As the defense claims, the prosecutor continued. Sterling laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "No, she did not ask for pain medication. She came to my office 3 weeks before the murder. She told me she needed a solution. She told me Malik was abusive. She showed me bruises on her arms. I know now that she painted them on with makeup, but at the time I believed her. She said she was terrified. She said he was going to kill her if she tried to leave. I heard Keisha gasp beside me. Malik abusive. My son had never raised a hand against anyone in his life. He was the gentlest man I knew. Brittany had slandered him even while plotting to kill him. And what did she ask for specifically, the prosecutor asked. "She asked for something that leaves no trace," Sterling said. Those were her exact words. She said, "I need something that looks like a heart attack. I need something that will be gone by the time the ambulance gets there." I told her about succinylcholine. I told her it was dangerous. I told her it was painful. She didn't care. She smiled when I explained how it worked. "And why did you help her?" the prosecutor asked. Sterling looked down at his hands. "Because I was in love with her. Or I thought I was. And because she promised me $500,000 from the insurance payout. She told me we could run away together. She played me. She played me like a fiddle." The courtroom was silent. Templeton looked defeated. Brittany was staring at the table, her face pale. Her mask was slipping. "So to be clear," the prosecutor said, "Brittany Thorne requested the paralytic. She planned the timing. And she administered the dose." "Yes," Sterling said. "She called me 10 minutes after he died. She wasn't crying. She was excited. She said, 'It worked, Isaac. He is gone.' She was celebrating. The jury was no longer looking at Brittany with pity. They were looking at her with horror. The image of the innocent widow had shattered, leaving only the cold, calculating monster underneath. After Sterling was cross-examined and led away, the prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the people rest." But the trial wasn't over for me. There was the sentencing phase, there was the victim impact statement, and there was the final piece of business regarding the estate. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. Brittany stood as the verdict was read. She didn't cry. She just stared ahead, her eyes empty. But the real blow was yet to come. The judge moved immediately to the sentencing hearing. This was my moment. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, looking at me, "do you have a statement you would like to read?" I stood up. I walked to the podium. I looked at Brittany. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were full of venom. "I don't have a statement about my feelings, Your Honor," I said, my voice booming in the quiet room. "My feelings are buried in the ground with my son. But I do have a document that needs to be entered into the record regarding the motive of this crime and the disposition of the assets." I pulled the leather-bound journal from my jacket pocket. I opened the back cover and slid out a folded document on blue legal paper. It was notarized. It was signed. Brittany looked at the document. She frowned. She didn't know what it was. "This is the Ironclad Trust," I said, holding it up. "Malik created this document 1 month before he died. He hid it in this journal and left it with his former teacher for safekeeping because he feared his wife would destroy it." I put on my reading glasses. "Malik knew you were stealing from him, Brittany," I said, looking at her. "He knew about the affair. He knew about the mother. He knew everything. And he knew you might try to kill him." I began to read from the document. "In the event of my death under suspicious circumstances or prior to the finalization of a divorce decree, I, Malik Thorne, hereby revoke all previous wills and beneficiary designations. I establish this irrevocable trust for the sole benefit of my son, Leo Thorne." Brittany's eyes went wide. She shook her head, mouthing the word "no." I continued reading. "All assets, including the marital home, my architectural firm, my savings, and any insurance policies held in my name shall be transferred immediately into this trust. My father, Darius Thorne, shall be named the sole trustee until Leo reaches the age of 25. I paused. I looked straight into Brittany's eyes. I wanted her to hear the next part. I wanted it to burn into her soul. As for my wife, Brittany Miller Thorne, due to her infidelity and financial theft, I hereby leave her the sum of $1. $1, I repeated. The silence in the courtroom broke. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. Brittany stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. $1, she screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable, a guttural shriek of pure animal rage. That is my money. I earned that money. I killed for that money. She realized what she said a second too late. She clapped her hands over her mouth, but the confession hung in the air, echoing off the walls. Then her eyes rolled back in her head, her knees buckled. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't a fake feint for sympathy. This was a total systemic shutdown. Her greed was the only thing holding her together, and I had just snatched it away. She collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud, hitting her head on the defense table on the way down. Bailiffs rushed to her. The judge banged the gavel, calling for order. Templeton stood there looking down at his client with a mixture of disgust and resignation. I watched them revive her. I watched her wake up disoriented and weeping. I watched the realization wash over her again. She had nothing. No money, no house, no freedom. Just $1 and a life sentence. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 20 years for fraud. As they dragged her out of the courtroom, she looked at me one last time. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She just looked broken. The monster had been declawed. I walked back to the gallery. Keisha was crying, tears of relief streaming down her face. "It is over," I said, hugging her. "He did it. Malik did it." We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. 1 year has passed since that day. I am sitting on the porch of the house on Wisteria Lane. We didn't sell it. It belongs to Leo now. I am just the caretaker. I renovated it. I stripped out all the cold gray furniture Brittany had bought and replaced it with warm wood and comfortable chairs. It feels like a home again. Keisha is inside cooking dinner. She has taken over the administrative side of Malik's architectural firm, keeping his legacy alive while we hire new architects to execute his designs. She is smart and capable, just like Malik said she was. And Leo. Leo is in the yard. I watch him running through the grass chasing a butterfly. He is 6 now. He looks more like his father every day. He has Malik's laugh. He stops running and looks at me. "Grandpa, watch this," he shouts. He does a clumsy cartwheel and falls into the grass, giggling. I smile. "Good job, Leo," I call out. I look up at the sky. It is a clear blue. "I kept my promise, son," I whisper. "They paid, every single one of them, and your boy is safe." I reach into my pocket and pull out a single crisp dollar bill. I keep it there as a reminder of what greed costs, a reminder of the price of a soul. Brittany never collected her inheritance. That dollar is framed in my office next to a picture of Malik running a marathon. I stand up and walk into the yard. I pick up my grandson and swing him around until he is dizzy with laughter. The darkness is gone. The long night is over. We are okay. We survived. And we are going to live. The sentencing hearing was the final nail in the coffin of the life Brittany Miller had tried to steal. I sat in the courtroom one last time, not as a victim, but as a witness to the closing of the ledger. The judge did not mince words. He looked at Brittany standing there in her orange jumpsuit, stripped of her designer clothes and her arrogance, and he saw her for exactly what she was, a predator. "Brittany Miller, you have shown no remorse," he said, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "You manipulated the legal system. You corrupted a medical professional, and you murdered a man who loved you for financial gain." Brittany started to shout. It wasn't fair, she screamed. She was the victim. Malik had trapped her. She was still lying even as the walls closed in. The bailiffs had to restrain her. "I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole," the judge announced. She collapsed. It wasn't a fake feint this time. It was the crushing weight of reality. She was 28 years old, and she would die in a concrete box. She would never wear Cartier again. She would never drive a Mercedes again. She would be just a number in the system she thought she was too smart for. Dr. Sterling stood next. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, leaving only a terrified man who had traded his oath for a promise of money he never saw. The judge gave him 15 years. He would be an old man when he got out. His medical license was revoked permanently. He was done. Then came Trey. He stood before the judge shaking like a leaf. He had testified. He had given us the car keys. He had helped seal the case. The judge gave him 2 years of probation and community service. It was a light sentence, but as Trey walked past me on his way out, he couldn't look me in the eye. He knew that in my book he was still guilty. He had sold his best friend for a car. He would have to live with that shame forever. I walked out of the courthouse. The reporters were there shouting questions. "Mr. Thorne, how do you feel? Is this justice?" I ignored them. I walked to my truck where Keisha was waiting. I didn't feel happy. You don't feel happy when you send people to prison. You just feel a heavy sense of balance. The debt had been paid. The account was closed. 1 year has passed since the gavel fell. I am standing in the driveway of the house on Wisteria Lane. It looks different now. The cold, sterile gray paint that Brittany loved is gone. We painted it a warm sage green, the color Malik always said he liked. The landscaping is no longer manicured to within an inch of its life. There are toys on the lawn. There is a tricycle overturned near the porch. It looks like a home where people actually live, not a museum piece waiting to be sold. I spent the last 12 months reclaiming this space. I ripped out the carpets Brittany chose. I sold the furniture she bought with stolen money and donated the proceeds to a drug rehabilitation center in Malik's name. It seemed fitting. Keisha and Leo moved in 6 months ago. At first she was hesitant. She didn't want to intrude. But I told her that this house belongs to Leo. It is his birthright. And a house this big is too lonely for an old man. I walk into the garage. It is Saturday morning. The garage door is open, letting the sunlight stream in across the concrete floor where I once dug for buried treasure. The hole is filled in now, sealed and painted over. But the workbench is still there. Leo is standing on a step stool peering under the hood of my old Ford F-150. He is 7 now. He has grease on his nose and a wrench in his hand that is almost too big for him to hold. He looks up as I walk in. "Grandpa, I think I found the spark plugs," he says, beaming. I walk over and ruffle his hair. "That is right, Leo. Good eye. Now remember what your dad used to say. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty." He nods solemnly, turning the wrench with fierce concentration. I watch him, and for a moment I see Malik. I see my son 20 years ago standing in this exact same pose, asking the exact same questions. The grief is still there. It never fully goes away. It is a dull ache in my chest that flares up when it rains or when I hear a song he liked. But watching Leo, the ache is softer. It is bearable. I am teaching Leo everything I taught Malik. How to change oil, how to balance a checkbook, how to look people in the eye, how to spot a lie. I am raising him to be strong, to be smart, to be the kind of man who protects his family. Keisha comes out into the garage, wiping her hands on a towel. She has taken over the business management of Malik's architectural firm. She is tough. She fired the clients who didn't pay on time and hired 2 new junior architects to finish Malik's designs. The firm is thriving. She is keeping his vision alive. "Lunch is ready, boys," she says, smiling at the grease on Leo's face. "We will be there in a minute," I say. "We are just finishing up." She kisses Leo on the cheek and goes back inside. I look at the wall above the workbench. I hung a picture there. It is the 3 of us. Me, Keisha, and Leo standing in front of the courthouse the day the verdict came down. We look tired, but we look undefeated. "Come on, Leo," I say, wiping his hands with a rag. "Let's go eat." After lunch, I tell Keisha I'm going for a drive. She knows where I'm going. She nods and packs a few flowers from the garden into a bag for me. I drive to the cemetery. It is a beautiful afternoon. The sky is a deep, endless blue with clouds that look like spun sugar. I park the truck and walk up the hill. The grass has grown in thick and green over the raw earth I stood on a year ago. I reach the grave. It is different now. The temporary marker is gone. In its place stands a beautiful headstone made of black granite. I designed it myself. I spent weeks getting it right. It reads, Malik Thorne, architect, father, son. He built a foundation of truth that could not be broken. I kneel down. The stone is warm from the sun. I place the flowers Keisha cut on the base. I trace the letters of his name with my finger. "I did it, son," I whisper. The wind catches my voice, carrying it away over the rows of quiet stones. They are gone. Brittany will never hurt anyone again. Sterling is in a cell. The house is safe. Keisha is running the firm. And Leo is amazing. He has your laugh. He has your curiosity. I take a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs. I miss you, I say. I miss you every single day. I am sorry I couldn't save you from her. I am sorry I didn't see the signs sooner. But I promise you this. I will save your boy. I will watch him grow up. I will make sure he knows who his father was. I will make sure he knows that he comes from good stock. From fighters. I stay there for a long time, just sitting in the quiet company of my son. The sun begins to dip lower in the sky, painting the horizon in shades of gold and violet. The shadows of the headstones stretch out long and thin. I stand up. My knees pop, but I feel strong. I feel lighter than I have in years. The burden of justice has been lifted. Now there is only the work of living. I turn to leave. As I walk down the hill, I see a car pull up. It is Keisha. She brought Leo. They get out of the car. Leo sees me and runs up the hill, his legs pumping. "Grandpa," he shouts. I catch him as he jumps into my arms. He is getting heavy. He is growing so fast. "Did you talk to Daddy?" he asks. "I did," I say. "I told him you fixed the truck." Leo smiles. "Did he like that?" "He loved it," I say. Keisha walks up beside us. She puts a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Darius?" I look at the grave one last time. Then I look at my family. The family that survived. The family that fought back. "I am okay," I say. I take Leo's hand. Keisha takes his other hand. "Let's go home," I say. We walk down the hill together toward the setting sun. The nightmare is over. The long dark night of lies and poison is finished. We have stepped into the light, and we are going to keep walking forward one step at a time, carrying the truth with us. My name is Darius Thorne. I am a father, I am a grandfather, and I am the man who brought the house down on the people who hurt my family, and if anyone ever tries to hurt us again, I will be ready. Because now I know that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a gun or a needle or a lie. It is an old man who has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. I spent 40 years trusting numbers because I thought they were the only things that couldn't lie. I was wrong. The most dangerous lies are often whispered by the people sleeping under your own roof disguised as love and duty. I learned the hard way that family isn't defined by blood. It is defined by loyalty. It is the people who stand beside you in the fire, not the ones holding the matches. To anyone listening, never let your kindness be mistaken for weakness. Protect your assets, but more importantly, protect your peace. If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. It might just save your life. If you believe justice was served today, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth and retribution. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save yourself?